A man transmigrated into a book, and Becameath pitiful, bullied punching bag inside it. After learning that his husband and the captivatingly popular main character Shu were truly in love, and that his husband had even tormented him heart and soul for the main character Shu's sake, the man turned around and threw himself into the arms of his husband's superior, the main character Gall. If he was going to play, he would play big. Everyone said it was desire, but he insisted on performing faith. At this moment, Zhang found out that his husband, in order to celebrate the birthday of the captivatingly popular Shu, had chosen to abandon him and not return home to comfort him during his estrus cycle. He dressed himself up, grabbed the freshly cooked fish soup, and headed straight to his husband's company. Only, his target had changed to his husband's direct superior, the president of the Gu Corporation, Gu Ying. A little over 10 minutes later, Zhang arrived at the base of the Gu Corporation building. After entering, he was immediately stopped and questioned by the front desk. "Hello, sir. Who are you here to see? Do you have an appointment?" Zhang gave a light laugh. "No appointment. I'm here to deliver something to my husband. May I wait here for him?" The young lady at the front desk was dazed by his smile, pausing for a moment before hurriedly saying, "Of course, you can. Please have a seat on the sofa over here." Zhang sent a message to Fu Jian, asking if he could come down for a moment, as he was downstairs at his company. Right after sending it, a torrential downpour began outside. He recalled the original plot. Tonight was the first day of the original host's estrus cycle. Although he had taken suppressants, he was still very uncomfortable. He had called Fu Jian, but no one had answered. So he injected another dose of inhibitor. In the end, he overdosed on inhibitors and fainted. Then, he was caught in the heavy rain, caught a chill, and ended up with a high fever, unconscious. Even the most important gland of an omega was damaged. And while he was painfully waiting for his husband to answer the phone, his husband was kissing the main character, the bottom. For the first time, he saw himself clearly. The private elevator for Bede's emotions opened. A tall, well-built man stepped out. He immediately spotted Zhang sitting on the sofa. His skin was very fair, almost glowing under the light. His entire aura was gentle, tender, yet carried a hint of cool detachment. Zhang seemed to sense the man's gaze, and looked over blankly. The next second, he smiled gently. As a form of greeting, Gu Ying paused for a moment and nodded in response. Just as he reached the entrance, he heard this person apparently receiving a phone call. "Not at the company? Then I'll go home first and wait for you. Or I can come find you at the place you're having the gathering. I made some Crucian carp soup, I can bring it over for you. See you in a bit, then." Gu Ying stood at the entrance waiting for the driver to bring the car around. A thought unconsciously crossed his mind. The young man seemed to only have a thermal pot with him, and no umbrella. The thought had just flashed when Zhang came out and stood beside him, busy looking down at his phone. After a while, he let out a soft sigh, then made another call to someone and said somewhat awkwardly, "Lin, are you free right now?" "It's okay, you go ahead and do your things. Remember to wear more clothes so you don't catch a cold. Wait for the driver to arrive." Gu Ying glanced at Zhang and asked, "Where are you going?" Zhang froze for a moment, then said the name of a club. It happened to be the place he was going, so he nodded and said, "It's on the way, get in." When opening the car door, Zhang, holding an umbrella and a thermal container, wasn't very comfortable. Gu Ying silently opened the car door for him. Only, his fingers got wet from the rain. After getting in the car, Zhang put down the soup he was holding. He looked at the man sitting in the back seat, resting with his eyes closed. He took out a handkerchief and asked, "Would you like to wipe your hands first?" Gu Ying glanced at it and didn't refuse. About 10 minutes later, they arrived at the destination. Zhang got out of the car first and, holding the door, said, "Keep the handkerchief. It's raining today. It might come in handy. Thank you for your help today." Gu Ying lowered his eyes and said, "No need. Whether he meant there was no need to keep the handkerchief or no need for thanks was unclear. For now, it seemed to mean the latter. Hearing 555 in his mind exclaim with surprise, Zhang, the of the beauty has risen to 10. The smile at the corner of Zhang Jiang's lips deepened. He stood in front of the club, looking at the brightly lit place in the heavy rain, recalling how in the original story, the garden owner was at home suffering from near fatal pain, while her husband, who should have been by her side caring for her, used celebrating a birthday as an excuse to be here drinking with another already engaged. Omega. How ironic. The car parked in front of the club slowly raised its window glass. The man glanced at the young man entering the club and said, "Let's go." Then he lifted his eyelids and swept a glance over the club. "Where is Bai Li?" The assistant in the passenger seat immediately said. "Mr. Bai is at the old residence tonight, accompanying the madam." "Should I call Mr. Bai for you?" Gu Ying pinched the bridge of his nose, leaned back in the car seat, and closed his eyes to rest. "No need. His heat seems to be next week. But his head has been feeling dizzy since just now. And his glands also have a burning sensation. Where is the next appointment?" The assistant flipped through the schedule, paused for a moment, and then said, "In 10 minutes at Haiyu Mansion. President Gu, if we go now, we won't make it in time. And it's raining heavily now. Should we change the location to Lan Mansion?" Lan Mansion was the place that young man had just entered. After a while, President Gu's voice was heard saying it's acceptable. Zhang hadn't really planned to show warmth to her tool-like husband anyway. Her main goal was to get FaceTime with Gu Ying. After completing the FaceTime task, she planned to walk around for a bit, just for appearances, then leave. And also see if she could gain some more favor. Whether it was her great luck, or the protagonist's aura around Bai Li was too dazzling. Zhang actually spotted the two of them at a casual table on the second floor. Bai Li, with a flushed face and tears in her eyes, was looking at the person beside her. Sitting next to her was none other than the tool-like husband. At that moment, he was thoughtfully handing a tissue to Bai Li. The atmosphere between them was harmonious, with a subtle, spoken ambiguity. This outing was under the pretext of a department gathering, but it seemed everyone in the group was quite pleased to see the little between the two. Even two young girls were whispering about them. It was probably an open secret by now. The question is, did Fujian's colleagues in the group know that he was already married? Zhang walked straight towards their table. She herself was eye-catching. Many people secretly glanced at her as she passed by. When she was just a few steps away from Fujian's table, Bai Li, upon seeing Zhang, was first stunned. Then her face instantly turned pale. Zhang felt scornful inside, but her smile became even gentler. Called out "husband" towards Fujian. The moment it left his mouth, the scene fell into an eerily silent stillness. A few young girls who had been secretly shipping them had their pupils shake in shock. They were all workplace veterans, who wouldn't know what kind of situation this was. What was done was really not cool. Finally, Fujian pulled out a chair and let Zhang sit down. "This is my beloved." Zhang greeted everyone and chatted for a few sentences. The colleagues in the group immediately developed an extremely favorable impression of him. When chatting with him, people felt very respected, but Zhang seemed to detect Fujian's hesitance, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. He took the first step, making an excuse to go to the restroom. Sure enough, Fujian also followed behind him and entered. "Why did you come?" Fujian, usually gentle, was uncharacteristically somewhat questioning this time. After speaking, he realized his tone was too harsh. He added a few more sentences to soften it. "It's raining heavily outside. You should have just waited for me at home. If you go out and catch a cold, the one who will suffer is still you." Zhang Jiang's eyes currently held mockery. The original owner obediently waited for him, but in the end, did he actually wait? "I came to bring fish soup. You just drank alcohol, your stomach must be uncomfortable, right?" Then he turned and leaned against the wash basin, his arms encircling the man's neck. He lowered his gaze, eyelashes trembling, and whispered softly, "I missed you." The somewhat displeased expression on Fujian's face instantly softened. "It's windy on rainy days, easy to catch a cold. When I called earlier, I already wanted to tell you not to trouble yourself." He originally wanted to say that the two of them should go home early together. But then I thought about a few days ago, Bai Li was always looking forward to celebrating his birthday with him. Today, even their date had to include colleagues, which already made him very unhappy. He felt somewhat conflicted. Faced with Zhang Jiang's rare, clingy demeanor, he couldn't bring himself to let go either. "Wait for me a moment, I'll let them know." Before he could finish speaking, a fingertip pressed against his lips. No need to accommodate the workplace and maintain interpersonal relationships. You all should have fun as you usually do. I'll go home and wait for you. Of course, he couldn't let his tool husband go home. Who wants to take care of a drunkard? Besides, if the husband is home, how can he sneak around? Fu Jian was moved and lowered his head to kiss Zhang Jiang, but was stopped. Then Zhang Jiang threw himself into his arms, the tips of his ears turning red. "Can we kiss when we get home?" Fu Jian chuckled softly and ruffled the top of his head. "I'll go get my phone and call a car for you. You should go back and rest first." In a little while, as soon as he left, Bai Li sneakily emerged from behind the wall. "So you're brother Jian's lover?" Seeing him, Zhang then remembered. Why did Bai Li react so strongly upon seeing him? In the original story, the original host had been in a car accident. His body was damaged, forcing him to end his dance career. But he loved dancing and often choreographed and practiced on his own. Those videos were all stored on his computer. After Bai Li became ambiguous with Fu Jian, he saw his computer and thought those videos were very good. At first, he just copied the dances he choreographed, learned them, and posted them on video platforms. I never expected a large number of people to say he was creative. Later, after he posted some choreography, he discovered that some difficult moves were hard to do without a foundation. So he found a video of Zhang Jiang without showing her face and posted it. Instantly, her fans grew even faster. So he started repeating his old tricks. This also became his stepping stone into another field. Zhang Jiang washed her hands again after just touching her tool husband. She meticulously wiped her fingertips clean and threw the tissue into the trash can. As she passed by, she whispered, "Bai Li, are you happy with what you stole?" Hearing the flustered sound behind her, Zhang Jiang's smile became even more obvious as she closed the door. Bai Li must be tossing and turning, unable to sleep at night. What exactly did he mean by stealing a man or stealing a video? Leisurely, she returned to the table to get her soup, apologized to a few of Fu Jian's colleagues, and left first. As she left, she wore an expression, and her smile was somewhat forced, just to let them speculate. Sure enough, those few people all looked heartbroken, urging her to go back and rest, and even said to tell them if she needed any help in the future. Zhang Jiang put away her earlier emotions, and surprisingly, saw a familiar car again near the entrance. Gu Ying was indeed here. She never expected to have actually won this bet. She still hadn't brought an umbrella when she came out, her tall, slender figure looking somewhat pitiful against the heavy rain. She waited in place for a while. And sure enough, a few minutes later, a group of people in suits, surrounding a tall man. Alpha walks out. The man wears a black coat over his suit. His aura is powerful as he walks over. Subconsciously, a path is cleared for him. Only Zhang Jiang is still standing by the door with his back turned to him. A waiter is embarrassed and hesitant. Zhang Jiang subconsciously looks up, suddenly makes eye contact with the man who has walked up beside him and is about to leave. Zhang Jiang suddenly purses his lips and smiles. What a coincidence. The wind is bitterly cold in such heavy rain. He is only wearing a thin shirt, his hair slightly messy. He looks as if he has been crying, the corners of his eyes red, making him appear even more pitiful when he smiles. Gu Ying says, Get in the car. Jang is taken aback. Won't it be inconvenient? Maybe I should wait a bit longer for a car. He had initially been somewhat suspicious, wondering if this person was sent by someone with ulterior motives. After being rejected, he dismisses this speculation. Gu Ying steps forward and walks outside, signaling for him to follow. Once in the car, Zhang gives his address. Gu Ying turns his head and stares at him. In the end, he says nothing and directly tells the driver to start the car. Zhang, of course, knows why. Because the address he gave is exactly where Gu Ying currently lives. The only difference is that Gu Ying bought his place outright, while Zhang is renting. The car starts smoothly. Zhang takes out a thermal container and then disposable utensils from his bag. Would you like to try the crucian carp soup I made? Gu Ying was about to refuse. Seeing his slightly reddened eye corners and his nasal-toned voice, she could roughly guess what had happened. It was nothing more than a beta being rejected after courting or trying to win favor. He didn't have the habit of eating late-night snacks, but the negotiation had gone smoothly, so he was in a rather good mood. Zhang poured the soup into a small paper bowl, watching Gu Ying resting with his eyes closed. She took a small bowl, poured one, and handed it to the assistant in the passenger seat. Want to try some? The assistant didn't expect there'd be a portion for them. Seeing that President Gu didn't say anything, they hurriedly accepted it. Zhang smiled at Gu Ying and said gently, with a slightly nasal tone, "Try some, sir. This is my thank you gift to you." Gu Ying looked at Zhang, then lowered his eyes and grunted in acknowledgement. He took the small paper bowl from her hands and took a sip. The warm soup settled in his stomach, making him feel much more comfortable. Even the constantly uncomfortable gland was no longer swollen and painful. Gu Ying said, "It's very good." Zhang Jiang's eyes curved happily in her heart, pleased to see the favorability rating brush up to 20. The car drove quickly and steadily. After arriving at the residential area, the driver familiarly drove into the underground garage. After Zhang got out of the car, she was surprised to find the man stepping out right after her. "You live here too?" Gu Ying nodded. The assistant handed him the several contracts he needed. After saying goodbye to Gu Ying, the assistant specifically waved to Zhang. "Goodbye, Mr. Zhang." Zhang watched as the car drove away. He turned around and entered the elevator with Gu Ying. After pressing the 25th floor, he looked at Gu Ying. "What floor do you live on?" Upon learning that Gu Ying lived on the 26th floor, Zhang Jiang's eyes widened for a moment. He also didn't expect it to be such a coincidence, and smiled. What a coincidence! As soon as the words fell, a loud clang was heard. Then the elevator jolted and came to a stop. Zhang braced himself against the elevator wall to steady his stance. He looked toward the control panel. All the buttons had malfunctioned and gone dark. A bit flustered, he turned to Gu Ying. "It seems the elevator is broken." He opened his phone and saw there was no signal. Scanning the elevator, he noticed what appeared to be an emergency call button. Gu Ying remained composed, only frowning slightly when the elevator stopped. He pressed the button. The button turned from red to green. Less than 30 seconds later, a voice came from the monitor above. "We sincerely apologize. Our property management has already called the fire department. They should be able to get the elevator open in about 30 minutes. Hearing the specific time frame, Zhang let out a long sigh of relief. It's good that everything is okay. As soon as he finished speaking, he noticed that Gu Ying had been unusually quiet. When he looked over, he saw that Gu Ying's thin lips were pressed tightly together, cold sweat beading on his temples, his face frighteningly pale, yet his neck was flushed a deep red. Zhang was startled. "Are you feeling unwell somewhere?" Gu Ying snapped back to attention. He took a deep breath and tried to regulate his condition. He pinched the bridge of his nose, his voice strained as he said, "It's nothing." He has some claustrophobia, albeit it's not severe. Today, the glands might be feeling uncomfortable. Plus, being suddenly confined in a closed space for a long time caused a bit of a strong reaction. Zhang Zhang sees that he seems to be getting worse and worse. His figure even swayed slightly, breathing rapidly, brows tightly furrowed. Otherwise, why don't use it down and rest for a while? There are still 20 minutes until we can be rescued. Gu Ying originally intended to refuse. But I don't know why, but when this person got closer, the back of my neck hurt even more. He leaned against the elevator and slowly slid to the ground, pinching the temples to relieve the increasingly dry throat. The urge to seize the omega pheromone. The susceptible period arrives early, a dazed consciousness, a parched throat. It made him extra crave from an omega. Pheromones and comfort. That beast-like instinct often made him disgusted with his own alpha gender. Half closing his eyes, he could see Zhang Zhang cautiously touching his forehead. He always hated others touching him, frowning and reaching out to block. But perhaps due to his sensitive period, his movements had slowed considerably. That beta's palm had already touched his forehead. He froze for a moment, feeling the burning sensation in the back of his neck gland grow stronger. Even beginning to crave that jasmine scent. He abruptly shook off that person's hand. Voice icy, "Stay away from me." As soon as the words fell, Zhang bit her lips somewhat helplessly. "Sorry, I just wanted to see if you had a fever." Gu Ying could even see the reddened back of his hand from being hit. But even though he himself was this rude, this person still appeared gentle and good-tempered. A thought inexplicably popped into his mind. Quite easy to bully. In the next instant, he frowned at this thought. It's not a fever, it's the sensitive period. Upon hearing this, Zhang Zhang was stunned for a moment, then his ears turned red all the way to the tips. In a daze, he caught a whiff of an unfamiliar but not unpleasant sandalwood scent. Somewhat domineering, occupied the narrow space. So it's the sensitive period. No wonder he's so resistant to his actions. He lowered his gaze and took a few steps back, quietly waiting for rescue personnel. After about 10 minutes or so, the man's condition worsened further. His face turned pale, the veins on his forehead bulging. Crimson blood flowed out from his fist. He called out, "Sir." Upon hearing this, Gu Ying, frowning, barely managed to regain focus, lifting his eyelids to look at him. Zhang Zhang was half kneeling in front of him, his face full of concern. "Sir, if the sensitive period isn't soothed in time, it can damage the gland. I can help you. Gland damage can drive alphas and omegas crazy. There are only 2 methods for soothing. Administer an inhibitor or use an omegas pheromones to provide relief." Gu Ying's voice was hoarse. "Do you have an inhibitor?" He saw Zhang Zhang look somewhat troubled and hesitate for a moment. A hand reached to the back of his neck and moved slightly. A rich and intense rose fragrance permeated the entire space, entwining with the scent of sandalwood. It was the smell of an omega's pheromones. Gu Ying paused for a moment before saying, "You're an omega?" Seeing this, Zhang Zhang pursed her lips and smiled. Her smile wasn't as restrained as before. She let out an hum, then shifted her body forward slightly, reached up to brush aside her hair, hooking the strands covering the back of her neck to one side, revealing her jade-white nape. From the corner of his eye, Gu Ying instinctively looked at Zhang Jiang's neck. That fair, soft area had a slightly protruding patch of tender flesh tinged with pink. Gu Ying frowned and averted his gaze, just in time to hear Zhang Jiang laugh and say, "Does it not seem like it?" Gu Ying thought, it really doesn't seem much like an omega. Omegas are always pampered and spoiled. Accustomed to being the center of attention, they are often willful and spoiled. But his temperament is gentle, his temper is very good, and he's very good at taking care of others. The key point is, his appearance also isn't like the cute omega group. He has a tall stature, even comparable to a beta's height. The 2 unfamiliar pheromones intertwined, effectively soothing the discomfort during the sensitive period. But a strange chemical reaction made Gu Ying, who had just found relief, suddenly frown. Something's a bit off. He looked up at Zhang. "Zhang." Sure enough, he saw this person's face slightly red, head bowed, not making a sound. But the tips of her ears were red. "Are you okay?" Zhang suddenly called upon. Somewhat dazedly lifted her face, the rims of her eyes red, slightly opening her mouth. "Ah." Then the eyes blinked. "I'm a bit hot." Gu Ying's expression was somewhat strange. "Your heat has arrived. Now." The atmosphere in the elevator became eerie and extreme. Ambiguity arose. An alpha in their sensitive period, and an omega in heat coming together. What else could they do? Only intimate, soothing, and marking. Zhang stood up and hurriedly pressed the emergency assistance button. After a pause, the other end said, "Hello, resident. We are very sorry." Zhang Jiang's mind was dizzy, faintly realizing that emergency rescue would be delayed. He turned and leaned against the elevator wall, wanting to take a deep breath to calm down. But all he felt was the pheromones mixed with sandalwood and the scent of roses. This scent was almost like an accelerant for him. His legs were somewhat weak, his head heavy, and mind light. He let out a soft ah and twisted his ankle straight. But contrary to expectations, he didn't fall. Instead, he was tightly held by the man. "Are you okay?" Hearing this, Zhang lightly furrowed his brows and lifted his peach blossom eyes. "Sir, I'm not in a good state right now. I might affect you. Please stay away from me." Still remembering the man's earlier words, now Zhang Jiang's condition was even more severe. The area around his gland was red and swollen, burning so much that even his eyelids were a bit red. The man spread his coat on the floor and let him half recline in the corner. Zhang, somewhat embarrassed, kept backing away, clearly burning so much that his neck was flushed red. Still forcing a smile and speaking to him gently, "Sorry to trouble you again." Gu Ying hadn't had time to do anything. Zhang took out from his pocket a omega-specific suppressant patch, tore it open, lowered his head, and prepared to apply the test patch. The suppressant patch could somewhat conceal the pheromones. "Your rut period has just eased. It wouldn't be good if it got triggered again by me. But doing this would worsen his heat condition." Gu Ying watched him expressionlessly, doing something he clearly knew would harm his own body. Zhang looked at the person who had taken his suppressant patch, only to see Gu Ying take a fountain pen from the folder, scratch the tiger's mouth, part of his hand, and drops of blood containing pheromones seeped out. Lifted his hand and held it in front of him, saying lightly, "No need to thank me, consider it a thank you for the fish soup." Zhang was stunned for a moment, pursed his lips, hesitated, and moved closer. Gently and softly took the man's tiger's mouth into his mouth. The sweet and metallic blood splashed in his mouth, probably because the burning sensation on the back of his neck eased a lot. Zhang Jiang's peach blossom eyes narrowed. He let out an involuntary soft moan, like a little kitten. The moment Zhang moved closer and took his tiger's mouth into his mouth, Gu Ying's whole body stiffened. He had actually just wanted the pheromones in the blood to evaporate faster. He hadn't expected this person to directly take his tiger's mouth into his mouth. The feeling of the wound being sucked was very strange. He barely suppressed his own peculiar feeling, pursed his lips, and stared faintly at this person. Zhang Jiang's eyelashes fluttered slightly, probably because it felt so comfortable. The corners of his eyes were tinged with a faint red. When his damp eyelashes lifted, his watery eyes were captivatingly beautiful. His hair slipped to the side of his face, feeling a bit itchy, so he hooked it behind his ear with his finger. He looked up and smiled shyly at the other person. "Thank you for your trouble." His lips were stained with blood, turning a deep red. It made one want to kiss him and taste it. Gu Ying lowered his gaze to his palm and suddenly spoke. "Gu Ying, my name." Zhang let out an "Oh, Mr. Gu, thank you." For some reason, even though he had heard the title, Mr. Gu, countless times before, at this moment, it felt strangely unfamiliar and odd. After maxing out the favorability level, The relationship between the two had made substantial progress. Zhang Zhang took the thermal container and followed closely, step by step behind. Gu Ying stepped onto the elevator and pressed buttons 25 and 26. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Zhang Zhang standing quietly by his side. His pale nape evoked a desire to possess and destroy. The gland on the back of his neck was slightly swollen, looking soft and easy to bully. The elevator reached the 25th floor, but Zhang Zhang didn't get off. Gu Yin glanced down at him. Zhang Zhang looked up and smiled at him. Mr. Gu, thank you. Could I add your contact? After getting consent, he took out his phone. You can scan me. Gu Ying originally wanted to refuse, but Zhang Jiang's nervousness made him unconsciously take out his phone. After adding it, Zhang Jiang waved his hand. Goodbye, Mr. Gu. Gu Ying nodded and instinctively looked at the contact information in his hand. Zhang Jiang's profile picture is a chubby orange cat. He frowned slightly. That cat looks very unhealthy, like a car. The person over there sent a picture. It was an orange cat waving with the word hello written on it. Gu Ying glanced at it twice as the elevator reached the 26th floor. He got off the elevator, opened the door, and entered the house. He moved into this apartment because it was close to his workplace. He had moved in less than a week ago, but he spent most of his time staying overnight at the company. This was his first time back. As soon as he entered, the room was dark and carried a chill. He pinched the bridge of his nose and turned on the light. The first thing he saw was several pairs of messy shoes. They probably belonged to Bai Li. Bai Li had been interning at the Gu Corporation recently. After getting permission from the Gu family's matriarch, she moved in here. But since the two weren't married yet, they lived separately. Gu Ying walked calmly toward the master bedroom. He opened the door and smelled a dusty odor. Frowning, he looked at the bed and desk, vaguely noticing they weren't very tidy. But since it was late, he didn't call housekeeping to clean up. He took out a spare blanket. He went to the living room sofa, planning to make do for the night. Perhaps due to an issue with the sensor, the drowsiness grew increasingly severe, so he needed to rest first. After an unknown amount of time, the doorbell rang. He frowned, sat up, put on his slippers, and went to open the door. When he opened the door, he found it was actually Zhang Zhang. Zhang Zhang gestured for him to look at what she was holding. It was a towel and a syringe. Mr. Gu, this is an alpha suppressant. Your condition is a bit poor today. You must take the suppressant. Is there anyone at home to take care of you now? If not, then I'll come in. Gu Ying originally wanted to refuse, but the soreness and swelling in his glands surged up. As if bewitched, he did not refuse. No need to change shoes, you can come straight in. Zhang Jiang's lips curled into a pleased smile, then pardoned the intrusion. After entering, he saw the bedding on the living room sofa. He hesitated for a moment, then sat on the separate small sofa. He took out a small bag containing the suppressant. He lowered his head and meticulously opened the packaging. Mr. Gu, please sit down first. I'll prepare it for you. Gu Ying sat on the sofa farthest from him. His consciousness was somewhat hazy. He involuntarily looked at Zhang Zhang, who was busy directly in front of him. He was wearing loungewear, exposing his fair, slender neck. Faintly, one could see the curve of his neck revealed when he lowered his head. After Zhang Zhang finished preparing, he looked up at Gu Ying. He suddenly noticed that the person seemed to have been quietly watching him all along. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he pursed his lips and smiled. Is it okay now? Gu Ying lowered his eyes and grunted in agreement, but didn't move. Zhang Zhang stood up and walked behind him. He carried a faint scent of roses, probably pheromones that weren't properly contained. The room was too quiet. Zhang Zhang stood behind him without making a sound. Gu Ying turned his head to look at him, who was covering the syringe with his palm. Zhang Zhang was momentarily dazed, appearing somewhat childish. He made a sound. Are you sleepy or uncomfortable? Gu Ying's Adam's apple bobbed as he lowered his gaze. Why do this? Zhang Zhang blinked and said with a smile. If done directly, it's very cold, and the pain would be quite intense. Holding it like this with the palm for a bit makes it much more comfortable. Then, using her fingertips, she pressed against the back of his neck. The slightly cool fingertips made Gu Ying stiffen. He had never liked being close to others. No one had ever touched the back of his neck before. Zhang seemed to lower her head, leaning close to the back of his neck. Warm breaths. Gu Ying's hand clenched, his Adam's apple bobbed, and for a moment, he made no sound. Zhang asked softly, "Are you okay? Does it hurt?" Her voice was extremely gentle in the quiet, drowsy night. Gu Ying lowered his gaze to look at his own fingers, and after a long while said, "No." The back of his neck was gently rubbed by a warm palm. Then came Zhang Jiang's voice, as if coaxing a child, "All right." She packed up the things, put the used syringe into the small bag she had brought. "Do you have ingredients at home? Let me cook for you." Before she finished speaking, Gu Ying interrupted, "Call me by my name." Zhang was stunned for a moment, then looked up at him. Curving the corners of her lips, she softly called out his name. "Then I'll cook for you." Actually, Gu Ying had originally intended to refuse, but unexpectedly, he nodded in agreement. Zhang followed him to the kitchen, looked at the completely empty refrigerator, finally found some dried noodles, tomatoes, and eggs, and made a noodle dish. Zhang cooked in the kitchen. Gu Ying leans against the doorframe, watching him arrange the unused kitchenware. The scene seems to carry a touch of warmth. Zhang finds a ramen bowl, puts the noodles in, tops it with the fried egg, and sprinkles chopped scallions. From behind comes Gu Ying's voice, "I'll do it." Gu Ying, tall and long-legged, reaches the dining table in just a few steps, puts down the noodle bowl and returns to the kitchen. Seeing there's nothing else to do, Zhang plans to leave. After all, he's built enough favorability points for today, and he's tired. Gathers his own things, walks to the kitchen door, and says goodbye to Gu Ying. "Mr. Gu, I'll head off first. You go ahead and eat." After eating, there's a dishwasher in the kitchen. Gu Ying's hand, just having taken out a bowl, pauses briefly. He doesn't try to make him stay. Puts things down and sees him out. Zhang tilts his head, looking at him with a smile. "This is a thank you gift for your pheromones." Gu Ying stands at the door, watching until he gets on the elevator. Only returns after the elevator display shows it has stopped on the 26th floor. Zhang stands at his own apartment door. Sensing keenly that something feels off, he opens the door. Fu Jian seems to have just returned, carrying the scent of alcohol. His gaze is somewhat unfocused, frowning as he looks at Zhang. "Zhang, why are you only coming back now, and still wearing home clothes?" Zhang lowers his eyes, annoyance hidden beneath a gentle tone. "I just went to take out the trash. I'll heat up some stomach-warming soup for you." Fu Jian's eyelids are slightly red, his brows relaxing. Zhang immediately keeps his distance from the alcohol-soaked man. "I couldn't be bothered to make noodles like I did earlier. I just casually reheated the remaining Crucian carp soup." Too lazy to wash the bowl, Anka glanced around privately, grabbed the bowl used for feeding stray dogs, scooped a ladleful, and handed it to Fu Jian. Anyway, this man wouldn't remember anything the next day after getting drunk. Fu Jian held the dog bowl and drank from it. Not sure if he was drunk and started to develop a conscience. Felt guilty for cheating on his childhood sweetheart wife. Zhang, I'm sorry." Then he involuntarily paused and murmured, "Why does it seem like there's the scent of alpha pheromones?" Before he could finish, Zhang cut him off. "There isn't." He hadn't even complained about the strong omega pheromones on him. After watching him finish drinking, she returned to the master bedroom, not bothering with Fu Jian, who had already fallen asleep on the sofa. On the other side, Gu Ying finished the noodles and sat back on the sofa. Then he heard the beep of the door unlocking. He frowned and looked toward the entrance. A figure reeking of alcohol stumbled in unsteadily. With a click, the main light was turned on. The entire room lit up brightly. Gu Ying watched him expressionlessly. Bai Li immediately froze in place and instinctively spoke. "What are you doing here?" Flustered and at a loss, he explained. "I received a friend's party invitation while at the old lady's place. So I went to have a meal with them." "Did you come here because your heat is approaching? Let's get closer and do a temporary mark," Gu Ying said calmly. "No need." Bai Li instantly stiffened all over. I didn't expect Gu Ying to directly refuse, looking somewhat embarrassed. "If you're angry, I won't go out with friends for evening gatherings anymore." Gu Ying pinched the bridge of his nose. Not angry. He just thought it unnecessary to interfere in the other person's affairs. Besides, he really didn't need the comfort of pheromones right now. Perhaps it was the scent of pheromones on that person, combined with the timely injection of suppressants. The sensitive period actually wasn't very hard to endure. Bai Li probably had some alcohol and was frightened today. He was a bit jumpy and nervous. "If you don't like it, just say so directly. No need to treat me like this." Gu Ying really didn't know how to comfort Peel, nor was he in the mood to comfort anyone. His originally quite pleasant mood was completely disrupted. He frowned. "I don't dislike it, nor am I angry. Even after the engagement, you are still a free and independent person. I am indeed in my sensitive period, but I've already taken suppressants." After speaking, he directly stood up and picked up his suit jacket. "Can you understand when I say it like this?" Bai Li's eyes were red, and his lips trembled. Gu Ying nodded towards him, stepped, and left, closing the door behind him. Bai Li stared blankly at Gu Ying's retreating figure. His heart was instantly thrown into extreme panic. He had a premonition. After Gu Ying left this time, he would lose him forever. Staggering, he rushed towards the door. With trembling hands, he opened the door, but there was no one there anymore. He covered his face and began to sob. Finally unable to hold back, he took out his phone and called Fu Jian. Fu Jian was awakened by the phone call, put on his clothes, and prepared to go out. "Where are you now? I'll come find you." As he stood up and was about to leave, the door to the master bedroom opened. Yang Zhang, wrapped in a sleeping gown, looked drowsy. "Are you going out?" Fu Jian paused. "There's an urgent matter at the company. I must go." Yang Zhang rubbed his eyes, adding to his allure. "Must it be now? It's raining heavily outside, and you've been drinking. Otherwise, I'll drive you there." The compatibility rate of their pheromones was very high. Not to mention, Yang Zhang was currently still in the most vulnerable period for an omega. The rose scent always spread involuntarily. Fu Jian instinctively avoided his eyes. "No need for me to hail a cab to go." Yang Zhang moved closer to him, gave him a hug, and smiled very gently. "Then come back early." Then, watching as Fu Jian walked out the door guiltily, the corners of his lips curled into a pleased arc. Unhurriedly, he walked into the study and took out Fu Jian's computer, turned it on, used a USB drive to export and back up his own dance videos from inside. He was going to start doing what really mattered. He was going to make Bai Li return everything that didn't belong to him. In the original story, Bai Li used the original owner's videos. At first, when fans asked if it was him, Bai Li did not deny it. Therefore, everyone thought the one dancing was him. And during that period, the relationship between the original owner and Fu Jian was already on shaky ground. After Fu Jian's affair with Bai Li was completely exposed, the original owner almost fell apart. His emotions were very unstable. He had long since stopped caring about Bai Li stealing his videos. But in Zhang Jiang's view, this was Bai Li profiting from someone's misery. And he still acted so innocent, pure, like a white lotus. He first opened the Star Network and took a look. Searched using the Bai Bai username from his memory. Sure enough, the first result was Bai Li's account. He clicked into the account homepage and the videos posted inside. He discovered that Bai Li actually had some skill. From the very first video he posted, he wore loose ancient-style clothing. It was backlit, very atmospheric. The newer, more recent videos later on were of Zhang Zhang dancing in ancient-style clothing without showing his face. If it weren't for someone very familiar in daily life, it's almost impossible to tell that the person has been replaced, especially since the latest video has already reached tens of millions of views. For a not-so-mainstream dance video, this is considered explosively popular. In this video, the youth is wearing a white long gown, with long hair and a soft waist, clearly portraying a cold and noble appearance. Yet in that backbend and trembling eyelashes, it somehow evokes a sense of ambiguous desire. It is precisely this contrast that made this niche video go viral. And even later, when Bai Li was invited to a variety show, he always recreated this video. It can be said that this video created the later Bai Li, who became a hot search sensation. Zhang Jiang's lips curled into a subtle smile. He registered a Starnet account named Zhang Zhang from his own dance videos. He picked a backbend move and posted it. 555 pouted angrily. Host Beauty, this protagonist is too malicious. He even stole your video to post. How outrageous. Let's expose his actions right now. Zhang Zhang gently shook his head and turned off the computer. Placed the USB drive in the bedside table of the master bedroom. Then put the ring on his ring finger. It's not the right time yet. When Bai Li truly becomes popular and steps onto the variety show stage, won't it be more interesting if we expose him then? 555's eyes sparkled. Host Beauty, you're so smart. The next morning, Zhang Zhang naturally got up, got ready, went downstairs, and drove to work. In this world, the original owner's identity is a university dance professor. The job isn't very busy, with only 4 or 5 classes a week. So most of the time is spent on personal hobbies and interests, or researching how to be a qualified Omega wife. After class, he drove to the dance studio at JL Building. The dance studio is located in a street-level commercial space. Outside the practice room is a huge glass window. Outside the window is a green grassy area with elegant scenery. So when Gu Ying's car stopped outside the dance studio, what he saw was a cool, long-haired Omega tying up his hair, half kneeling on the ground, instructing a little girl with bun hairstyles. That little girl probably liked him very much, taking small steps on her short legs and tiptoeing. With a smack, she kissed the young man on the cheek. The young man was slightly stunned and smiled shyly. Lu Jin, who had come along with Gu Ying to join the fun, clicked his tongue in amazement. Who is that? His looks are just too unfair. This face is a heavenly dish. With cool, refined features, long hair, and even coaxing a child. Oh my God, I'm falling in love. I've even thought of what our children's names will be. Gu Ying glanced at him coolly. You? Lu Jin turned to look at him a few times, almost forgetting to chase after the beauty. After all, Gu Ying has always been like an unattainable flower, with suitors almost never ending. But this guy just doesn't get moved. He didn't even refuse the arranged marriage set up by his family after graduation. He felt that Gu Ying getting married was just a task. Lu Jin looked at him in surprise. It's not like you complained about me when I used to be like this. Why are you saying something today? The more he looked, the more he felt something was off. You're not finally getting some action and starting to get interested in these things, are you? Gu Ying frowned and shot him a look. Shut up. Lu Jin chuckled teasingly. Why are you being so protective? You won't even let me talk about it. Gu Ying ignored him and directly opened the car door to get out. Lu Jin stared intently at the assistant. The assistant, sweating profusely, didn't dare reveal any information about the boss. After all, those two had left together last night. And when coming to work this morning, he vaguely sensed a change in the boss. But of course, he didn't dare say too much, and could only force an awkward smile. Lu Jin, with no gossip to chew on, sulkily went to find Gu Ying, and to also get the contact information of that dance teacher. When he quickened his pace and reached the dance studio, he suddenly noticed Gu Ying was just then talking to that teacher. That aloof Omega looked somewhat surprised at Gu Ying, while holding a petite little girl in his arms. And Gu Ying, who was usually arrogant and avoided Omegas like the plague, was actually chatting with that aloof Omega. That Omega was smiling very gently. Compared to the tall Alpha in a suit opposite him, there was quite a noticeable size difference due to his smaller frame. Lu Jin instinctively took out his phone and snapped a photo. Only after taking it did he realize those few people had all turned to look at him. He gave an awkward smile. The scenery here is quite nice. The sunset is pretty. Gu Ying glanced at him, but didn't say anything. Zhang curved his eyes into a smile. The view here is great. I was just saying I wanted to take a photo and post it on my social media. Lu Jin felt that this time he was truly going to fall for someone. He cleared his throat lightly and moved closer to Zhang Jiang. He crouched down to look at the little one in Zhang Jiang's arms. I am Yuan's god uncle. You must be Yuan's teacher, right? Can I get your contact info? Zhang was stunned and hadn't yet had a chance to respond. Gu Ying said calmly, "Let's go eat." After speaking, he reached out his hand toward Zhang Jiang. Zhang instinctively placed his hand in Gu Ying's palm. With a tug, the two stood up. The little girl blinked her big eyes, looking very clever. She reached out toward the gentle and sweet-smelling Yuan's legs hurt. I need a hug to feel better. Zhang smiled, very indulgent toward the child. All right then, how about teacher holds Yuan, okay? Yuan nodded heavily, but before Zhang Jiang could bend down, Gu Ying directly picked up the child and held her in his arms. Yuan's face was pressed against the man's stiff suit jacket. Yuan looked completely bewildered. Zhang Jiang was somewhat puzzled. Mr. Gu, let me hold. Gu Ying started walking forward. She's heavy. Yuan understood. Immediately, her little mouth quivered, and tears started falling pit-a-pat. Uncle is bad. Uncle is the heavy one. Zhang Jiang quickly walked a few steps and coaxed softly. Yuan isn't heavy. Super cute. Stop crying, Yuan, little beauty. His voice was gentle as he reached out and hooked Yuan's chin. Yuan, this looks conscious one, stared at Zhang and started laughing. So well behaved. Yuan, baby. He laughed very gently. From Gu Ying's angle, she could see his upturned eyelashes and his crimson red lips. At this moment, Zhang was clearly holy, eternal, and gentle. An uncontrollable, indescribable secret surged into his mind. Gu Ying held the child. Zhang Jiang, cool and holy, lifted his head to look at Gu Ying. The two looked at each other as if about to kiss. Lu Jin subconsciously called out, Gu Ying. When the two looked over, he awkwardly cleared his throat. Didn't you say we were going to eat? I'm almost starving to death. The two seemed to be startled awake. Gu Ying continued to look at Zhang. After Zhang Jiang collected himself, Shu Di lowered her eyes, and the roots of her ears slowly turned red. After a long while, it was still Lu Jin who coughed twice and asked what to eat. Zhang Jiang's eyelashes trembled slightly, and she gently bit her lower lip. She looked at Yuan, who was being held by Gu Ying, and asked softly, Yuan, what do you want to eat? Yuan blinked, tilting her head to look at Zhang Jiang. Brother Zhang, Jiang's ears are red. She is young and also likes the fragrant and gentle teacher, Zhang. After saying that, she curved her crescent eyes and giggled. He even reached out to Zhang Jiang, asking to be held. Zhang Jiang also liked the well-behaved Yuan, reaching out to pinch Yuan's fingertips. Sure. This time, Gu Ying didn't make a sound and directly carried Yuan forward. Zhang Jiang was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly followed. Only Lu Jin was once again left behind, forgotten in place. He looked suspiciously at the three people walking ahead. The tall Alpha had an imposing and strong presence, holding an adorable child who bore some resemblance to him in the eyes and brows. The slender, aloof Omega trailed a few steps behind. Eyes curved into a smile as he looked at the child being carried by the man. It completely looked like a family out for a stroll. Lu Jin tutted, shook his head, and laughed, thinking it impossible. He shrugged and quickly caught up. The group went directly to their usual restaurant, Yaoyuan. Yaoyuan was opened by a prominent figure in their circle. It operated on a reservation-only system, with few dishes and high prices. But the environment was tranquil, located in the city center. A 10-minute drive away, the Maybach stopped in a small alley. They got out of the car. A young man, dressed discreetly, smiled and came up to greet them. He patted Lu Jin's shoulder and nodded to Gu Yin. Old Chen just developed a new Huayang dish today. You've come at the right time. The young man smiled at Yuan, then looked at Zhang Zhang. He knew about Gu Yin's engagement some time ago. But the one he got engaged to was from the Bai family, whom he had also met. So today, the subtle distance between these two. It's almost like having Omega by his side. If you were to say, it's that kind of relationship, it doesn't seem like it either. Chen Jun didn't make things difficult for himself and looked at Zhang Zhang as he asked. You look a bit unfamiliar, are you? As soon as the words fell, a deep male voice came from the side above to Zhang Zhang. Now, this is interesting. He didn't mention his identity and directly said the name. And it was Gu Ying, who usually speaks little, who opened his mouth. Regardless of whether there are any other relationships or not. Chen Jun mentally elevated Zhang Jiang's status a notch. He shook hands with Zhang Zhang, and even specifically asked about Zhang Jiang's preferences because of this. Only after everyone had entered and settled in, did he go down to arrange things with the kitchen. Lu Jin wore a faint, ambiguous smile. It really has to be when we're following our boss Gu. When has young Master Chen ever personally come out to welcome us before? Gu Ying swept a faint glance over him and ignored him. The flavors of the dishes weren't quite to Zhang Jiang's liking. He took a symbolic taste. Yaoyuan has good service, and even has special staff to take care of children. But Yuan was probably shy around strangers. He kept pulling a long face, unhappy, with tears in his eyes. Lu Jin was talking to Gu Ying about the newly opened real estate development in the city center recently. Frowning, he seemed somewhat troubled by the tender in his hand. A while ago, the higher-ups told me this location is good. Metro Line 8 is about to open. Lin Heng is also competing with me for the bid over there. But if we want to take it, we really don't have enough liquid funds on hand. Gu Ying casually shook his head. These past few days, provincial museum experts went to survey and said it's an ancient tomb from the Song dynasty. Lu Jin took a sharp breath, raised his wine glass, and downed it in one go. Thanks, bro. I almost got trapped. The two of them were discussing serious matters. Zhang Zhang opened his phone and glanced at the message on it. He frowned slightly and put down the phone. He looked at Yuan, who had tears in her eyes, and hugged her. Seeing Zhang Zhang, Yuan immediately smiled and nodded. She snuggled entirely into Zhang Jiang's arms, her face full of soft, chubby cheeks. She gave Zhang Jiang's face a kiss. Mwah. Kiss. Zhang Jiang's eyes curved as he lowered his head. He kissed her eyelids. Yuan is so good. Suddenly, it went quiet around him. He was startled for a moment, and looked up. He discovered that both Lu Jin and Gu Ying were looking at him. He felt a bit awkward. Did Yuan and I disturb you? I'll take Yuan out for a stroll. After saying that, he stood up and took Yuan's small hand. We just finished eating. I'll take Yuan to walk it off. Gu Ying nodded. The figures of one big and one small disappeared from the private room. Lu Jin sighed with disappointment. What a pity. Gu Ying lowered his head to look at the clear wine in his cup, and ignored him. It's a shame. Someone as good-looking as Zhang, a great beauty, with a good temper and such poise, so perfect to be a wife. How could they already be married? The porcelain cup in Gu Ying's hand rolled onto the carpet. Lu Jin looked at him suspiciously. What's wrong with you? Is the wine not good today? Even so, you didn't have to just throw it. You say, which man is actually so lucky? He actually managed to trick Zhang into being his wife. Gu Ying lowered his gaze, looking at the wine glass that had rolled to the ground, thinking to himself, he really is lucky. How do you know? Lu Jin clicked his tongue. Zhang sent a lot of messages while having dinner with us. She also checked her phone several times during the meal. She must have been reporting to her husband. It's totally understandable that such a beautiful wife's husband would check in on her. Especially since Yuan and Zhang are so close. That gentle demeanor probably means they're planning to have a child. Most importantly, didn't you see the ring on Zhang Jiang's ring finger? Gu Ying looked at the newly replaced sake. After a long while, he finally let out an M. Lu Jin didn't notice his reaction and continued to sigh. Who knows which man is so fortunate? Then his eyes shifted. What do you think if I use some tricks to make teacher Zhang divorce her husband? The more he thought about it, the more amusing it seemed. That way, he'd compensate that lucky man with some money. And then live a good life with teacher Zhang. Maybe you'll have a godsend soon, ha ha ha. As he spoke, he looked up and met Gu Ying's intense gaze. He was immediately taken aback. Gu Ying's features were already sharp and handsome. Usually, his imposing presence made most people fail to notice his looks. But at this moment, when Gu Ying stared straight at someone, it sent a chill rising from the depths of one's heart. Lu Jin subconsciously wanted to say something. But the next instant, Gu Ying's gaze shifted away. Then he stood up and walked out. What are you going to do? Gu Ying wiped his fingertips with a handkerchief, the scent of alcohol wafting casually. Restroom. Lu Jin blankly said, oh, then felt something was a bit off. But our private room has a restroom. Why are you going outside? Before he could finish, Gu Ying had already reached the door. He turned slightly, glanced at him out of the corner of his eye, and spoke softly. Don't let me hear you make such jokes again. With that, he opened the door and left. Lu Jin was stunned. He felt as if he had learned something he shouldn't have known. When the group arrived at Yaoyuan, it was just evening, but now night had fallen, with flowing water in the corridor. The sound of rushing water echoed from the artificial rockery. At the end of the corridor was the restroom. Zhang finished washing Yuan's hands. Just as she was about to hold Yuan's hand and head back, she ran into a group of guests reeking of alcohol. These guests were dressed trendily, young and flamboyant. The young man at the front had a streak of silver in his hair, wearing an earring, tall and handsome. He was originally heading to the restroom, but his gaze lingered with interest on Zhang. Zhang, what's your name? The noisy chatter and laughter behind him paused for a moment. Then 7 or 8 young men turned to look at the person their leader was hitting on. This Omega was cool and elegant, yet dressed in comfortable, lazy attire. Bent over, talking to a child. Just now, I turned my head to take a glance. It made everyone freeze in place. What kind of face was this? Almost like a legendary, seductive spirit. The beauty seemed a bit dazed, and softly responded with a sound. That sound made many people gasp lightly. The voice was clear and crisp, yet very soft, just like the strangely alluring aura. The young man's smile deepened as he took a few steps forward. He half squatted down and introduced himself. My surname is Xia, can we be friends? He took out his phone and opened the QR code. Do you have time tomorrow? Tomorrow is Kixi Festival. The intention of asking someone out couldn't be more obvious. Zhang pursed his lips, somewhat at a loss. He tightened his arms around. Sorry, it might not be very convenient. A young man nearby who was joining in the fun said. This is our brother Xia, Duty. You should be more cooperative. Xia Lin interrupted this person's words. Looked at the child. Zhang was holding. Uncle will take you to eat ice cream. Zhang politely forced a smile and refused. Picked up on Yuan and wanted to leave. But the onlookers nearby blocked his way. No hurry, chat for a bit before going back. These pampered young men found him unfamiliar. Knowing he wasn't from any of the prominent families, they saw no reason to fear him. Xiaolin, however, was quite calm and didn't press him. Just wanted to make friends. I have no other intentions. I just feel like we hit it off. We could interact more in the future. Zhang Jiang frowned slightly and looked at him. I'm already married. Xiaolin raised an eyebrow. It doesn't matter if you're married. Zhang Jiang had no choice but to take out her phone and hand it to Xiaolin. The two exchanged contacts. Xiaolin, true to his word, didn't pester her after adding her. He only said he would escort her for a bit. Zhang Jiang curved her eyes at him. It's only a few minutes' walk. Xiaolin looked at the little girl in her arms. Let me carry her for you. This little girl looks chubby and quite heavy. Suddenly, a deep voice reached both their ears. They instinctively looked toward the corridor corner. A man in an overcoat walked in leisurely. The man just glanced indifferently at Xiaolin. Then he looked at Zhang, scanning her up and down to confirm she wasn't hurt. Only then did he reach out and, without asking, take Yuan from Zhang Jiang's arms. He stood firmly by her side and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." This statement was a declaration. Zhang Jiang nodded and had only taken 2 steps, following the man, when she heard Xiaolin call out loudly, "Brother Gu, long time no see." Upon hearing this, Gu Ying paused and glanced at Xiaolin, nodding before intending to leave. Xiaolin looked at the two and asked, "Brother Gu, is this your person?" Zhang Jiang wanted to explain, but before she could finish, Gu Ying interrupted. Gu Ying didn't respond to Xiaolin's question. He directly stopped, tilted his head to look at Zhang Jiang, and said, "Aren't you coming?" Zhang Jiang's eyelashes trembled slightly as she looked up to meet Gu Ying's gaze. The air almost fell silent. Gu Ying had long legs and walked quickly. Zhang Jiang had to quicken her pace into a light jog to keep up. Yuan stammered. "Uncle is bad." Gu Ying glanced at the chubby little girl, scaring Yuan into whimpering. Gu Ying lowered his gaze for a moment, lost in unknown thoughts, suddenly stopped walking. The person behind couldn't dodge in time, let out a sudden light gasp as they bumped into his back. Zhang Jiang, flustered, took a few steps back, pursed her lips and looked helplessly at Gu Ying. "Mr. Gu, are you angry?" Hearing this, Gu Ying was stunned. Why was he angry? What right did he have to be angry? But that feeling of congestion in his heart. Indeed, he was displeased. But clearly, the two had only met a few days ago and seen each other a few times. The closest relationship was being Yuan's dance teacher. He had no right to be angry. He lowered his gaze and said deeply, "No, you're overthinking it. I just feel that since you came with me today, I have an obligation to take good care of you." Zhang Jiang pursed her lips into a smile and didn't speak. Gu Ying saw her appearance distinctly outstanding, yet seemingly easy to bully, soft, and easy to manipulate and frown. He turned and directly led her toward the exit. "I'll take you back first." Zhang Jiang was somewhat doubtful but didn't ask much, being very compliant. This demeanor, however, made Gu Ying's brows press even lower. The two reached the entrance. The driver waited nearby and opened the car door for them. They got in the car. No one spoke. Only after driving for a while, Yuan fell asleep with soft snores. Zhang Jiang's voice was very light, looking at Gu Ying, who was still replying to work emails in the car. "Sorry to trouble you today. Are you still feeling unwell?" Gu Ying's hand paused while replying to the email, his voice indifferent. "It's fine. The inhibitor has quite a few side effects. If you have any reactions, you should see a doctor promptly." Gu Ying's cold, stern expression softened slightly. He was about to say something when his phone rang twice. It was Zhang Jiang's phone. He looked apologetically at Gu Ying and answered the call. His voice was very soft and gentle, a tenderness different from his usual gentle way of speaking. "I'm still outside having a meal with the student's parent. I was covering Teacher Yang's class today." He laughed twice. "All right, I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Wait for me at home, okay?" The other side seemed to say something somewhat ambiguous. Zhang felt a bit awkward, the roots of his ears turning red. He cautiously glanced at Gu Ying, then said very softly, "I miss you too." After the call ended, the car interior returned to silence. Gu Ying lowered his eyes. Zhang Jiang let out a light sigh and looked at him. "Mr. Gu, did you want to say something to me earlier?" Gu Ying's voice was very cold. "No." His expression turned even colder. When they reached near the residential area, Zhang Jiang said to the driver in a very soft voice, "Hello, sorry, could you please stop at the entrance of the residential area? I need to buy something, you can drop me off there." The car stopped at the entrance of the pharmacy. Jiang got out of the car and walked into the pharmacy. The driver hesitantly looked at Gu Ying. "Mr. Gu, are we leaving now? Or should we wait until Mr. Jiang returns?" Gu Ying didn't respond. He just closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. The driver understood Gu Ying's meaning. He quietly turned off the engine and waited. After 10 minutes, the person finally appeared at the entrance, probably not expecting Gu Ying to wait for him. He paused for a moment before quickly getting into the car. Zhang Jiang was slightly breathless. "Mr. Gu, I'm so sorry to trouble you." Because of his little run, his hair was somewhat disheveled. A strand of hair fell loose in front of his eyebrows, adding a touch of vagueness to his beautiful features. His peach blossom eyes also held a smile. His full, crimson lips looked even more enticing under the moonlight. Slightly parted, his lamb-like face seemed to be begging for a kiss when he looked at people, making one want to pinch his chin and bite down hard, tearing at his lips. Perhaps he had sweated a little. A bit of his pheromone scent overflowed, making Gu Ying instinctively want to investigate the back of his neck. His Adam's apple bobbed. He lowered his gaze and met Zhang Jiang's eyes. This Omega was so alluring, and yet so soft and easy to bully. Like a stupid, beautiful little lamb, bleating at all the alphas who would make a move on him, making one want to possess and destroy him. He spoke coldly, "Are you always like this?" Zhang Jiang was confused and asked instinctively, "Like what?" Gu Ying's thin lips parted slightly. "Always like this." Clearly, he already had an alpha. But outside, he still kept in contact with alpha. But after saying that, he frowned, showing a hint of rare regret. In the next instant, he watched wide-eyed, as Zhang Jiang's eyes suddenly reddened. As if deeply ashamed, his eyelashes trembled slightly. A misty glimmer welled up in his eyes. Gu Ying was taken aback, frowned, and turned his head away. He didn't know how much time had passed. When he heard Zhang Jiang's voice, still soft, but with a slight nasal tone, "Sorry, Mr. Gu, I've probably caused you trouble. From now on, I'll be careful to keep my distance from you." The air inside the car fell into silence. After a long while, Zhang Jiang finally heard the man say in a deep voice, "That's not what I meant." Zhang Jiang pressed his lips together and didn't look at Gu Ying as he usually would. Instead, he lowered his gaze and said softly, "I understand. You don't need to worry." After saying that, he seemed to remember something. He lowered his head and opened the paper bag in his hand, pulled out a tube of ointment from inside, hesitated for a moment, then put it back. Gu Ying frowned, staring at him, and suddenly asked, "What is it?" Zhang Jiang was taken aback and finally looked up at the man. Gu Ying's voice grew even deeper. His gaze fell on Zhang Jiang's hand. "Are you giving it to me?" Zhang Jiang bit his lower lip lightly, somewhat hesitant. After a while, he let out a soft sigh. "No, you've misunderstood." He sealed the paper bag in his hand and explained softly, "My husband cut his finger. This is just some ointment I bought for him." His Adam's apple bobbed, probably because there were some things he found hard to say. He lowered his head to look at the paper bag in his hand. The profile of his face was both cold and gentle. "You don't need to worry. I know you're afraid I'll cling to you. I'm just used to taking care of people, not because I want anything. After all, we're both adults." Anyone could infer a bit from Gu Ying's attire during these recent meetings, and the entourage accompanying his outings. Gu Ying's status is either wealthy or noble, such a proud son of heaven. From birth until now, must have been raised being cherished by countless people, chased by countless others. Zhang took a breath, as if to disguise his embarrassment, curved his knuckle to hook his hair behind his ear. "We've arrived, Mr. Gu. I'll get out first." As if mustering his final courage, he lifted his head, pressed his lips together, and smiled towards Gu Ying, revealing a small dimple. "Thank you for taking care of me these past few days." It sounded like a farewell. For some reason, Gu Ying had a premonition that if he let him go today, the two would never see each other again. His heart was somewhat unsettled, though he didn't understand the reason. He still followed his instincts, subconsciously grabbing Zhang Jiang's wrist and saying in a deep voice, "Zhang Jiang." Zhang Jiang turned back, somewhat bewildered. The two looked at each other. Gu Ying's eyes were narrow and long. When he stared straight at someone, it gave a chilling feeling of being targeted by a fierce beast. He spoke expressionlessly, in a deep voice. "For a cut finger, do you need pheromone-soothing ointment?" As the name suggests, pheromone-soothing ointment is used for alphas, drugs for the susceptible period, mainly to prevent skin stress allergies after alpha takes the inhibitor. Usually only married, very meticulous omegas would prepare it for their husbands. Zhang Jiang was somewhat flustered, wasn't he? Gu Ying looked at him calmly. "Is it for me?" Zhang Jiang let out a breath, having lost the resistance. Finally, he said, in a very small voice, "Yes." Gu Ying reached out his hand. Zhang Jiang hesitated for a moment, but ultimately opened the paper bag, took out the ointment and placed it in his palm. "Here you are." Probably out of habit from taking care of people, he couldn't help but give detailed instructions. Then took out a pack of cotton swabs. "First, apply a little on your hand to see if you have an allergic reaction." Gu Ying nodded. After Zhang Jiang finished speaking, the two fell into silence again. He smiled. "Then I'm leaving." Picked up the paper bag and opened the car door. This time, Gu Ying did not stop him. The Maybach's window silently rolled down. The man quietly watched Zhang Jiang enter the unit door. After a while, he said in a deep voice, "Drive." 555 popped out, hopping happily. "Host Beauty, you're amazing." The favorability value of the target has risen to 60. Zhang Jiang raised an eyebrow. 60 favorability? It could almost be said that there are already feelings of liking. It seemed like I just showed a little concern for Gu Ying. Did it rise that quickly? He lowered his eyes and softly hummed in agreement. The elevator arrived at the door. He entered the password and went inside. Then he heard the sound coming from the living room. Entered, changed shoes, and walked to the living room. When he saw Fujian, his eyes and brows softened with tenderness. "You came back so early today, no overtime work?" Fujian nodded. Zhang Jiang's peach blossom eyes curved as he walked toward Fujian on the sofa, casually set down the paper bag and sat beside him. "It's great today, while having dinner with that parent. I asked the chef about the recipe for that Westlake vinegar fish. I was thinking of making it for you. But I didn't buy any fish today." His face was fair, his neck slender, his nose straight, and his lips red. When expressionless, he was clearly the aloof, unattainable flower on the high peak. But as soon as he smiled, the aloofness melted entirely into tenderness. Even Fujian could not remain unaffected, feeling both guilt and affection in his heart. He couldn't help but pull Zhang Jiang toward himself into his embrace. "I've already eaten outside." Zhang Jiang blinked, the tips of his ears slightly red. "Then I'll make it for you tomorrow." He coughed lightly twice and nestled into Fujian's embrace. "Tomorrow is Saturday. Do you have any dinner plans in the evening?" Fujian was in the midst of climbing the career ladder, so much of his time was spent attending banquets. Zhang Jiang had always been understanding of this. Actually, Bai Li had invited him to visit the ancient town in the neighboring city tomorrow. Fujian frowned slightly, ultimately for some unknown reason. His gaze shifted to the tips of Zhang Jiang's ears. "I have time tomorrow. I'll take you to the ancient town next door for a stroll." Zhang Jiang's peach blossom eyes widened with anticipation and delight. "Really? Will it affect your work? He expressed his concern cautiously. Fu Jian's heart softened. Bai Li was innocent and lively, born into a noble family. But she was always self-centered. She pursued her own desires without considering others. Whereas Zhang Jiang was the most gentle and considerate. Almost the complete opposite of Bai Li. As he lowered his head, he caught sight of Zhang Jiang's neck. You used an inhibitor. There was a small needle mark on the back of Zhang Jiang's neck. The surrounding skin was bruised. It was obvious what had been done. Zhang Jiang instinctively covered that spot. Yesterday, you were out with colleagues for dinner. And I was afraid of disturbing you, so I came back first to take the inhibitor. He pursed his lips and smiled somewhat shyly. It's okay, just once in a while. Besides, next month, my heat cycle coincides with your rut period. He pursed his lips, lowered his gaze, and his eyelashes trembled slightly. The unspoken meaning was very clear. An alpha and an omega's susceptible estrus periods coinciding. Deep bonding, a permanent mark. Every newlywed couple would choose this. Fu Jian paused, his gaze shifting. He thought of Bai Li, teary-eyed last night, wanting to kiss her, saying he wanted his mark. But then, he looked at Zhang Jiang in his arms, completely dependent on him. The breakup that was supposed to happen today stuck in his throat, neither coming up nor going down. They had even made plans for an outing tomorrow. When Gu Ying returned home with the documents, he found that Bai Li had already returned. His hand holding the ointment paused for a moment. He nodded towards Bai Li and went straight into the guest bedroom. He didn't notice Bai Li's somewhat stiff expression. Closing the door, he placed the ointment in his hand on the table. After his shower, he intended to continue replying to emails. But out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that tube of ointment. He paused, only then suddenly noticing the discomfort on the back of his neck. It seemed to be just a pinprick of pain. The email on the screen hadn't been updated for a long time. His distinct, bony hand finally picked up that tube of ointment. When opening the ointment, he found very little resistance. Gu Ying lowered his gaze to look at the open ointment, his brow and eyes slightly moving. The sealed foil inside the ointment tube had been opened. For some reason, a thought rose in him, as if moved by ghosts or gods. The ointment must have been opened by... He thought this for no reason at all. He took out his phone and sent a message. Only after sending it did he frown and plan to retract it. But the other side seemed to be on their phone almost constantly, replying in seconds. Gu Ying frowned, put down his phone, and opened Zhang Jiang's page. The profile picture was still the same orange cat as before. Fluffy, basking in the sunlight, its fur wildly unruly. He hadn't yet figured out what he wanted to do. When the phone rang, the word "mother" appeared on the screen. Madame Gu said, "The weather is good tomorrow. Come with me to the neighboring Wuling Mountain to pay respects. Since you're getting married soon, go there to pick an auspicious date. Bring Zhao Li along too." The madam probably knew he wasn't very invested in the arranged marriage, and added, Yin, this marriage is something you agreed to with your own words." Gu Ying relented. "I'll tell Bai Li." The next day, the weather was clear and suitable for travel. Today, for an auspicious outing, Zhang wore loose, comfortable clothes. The two strolled around the ancient town, trying many snacks. By the afternoon, they decided to go to Wuling Mountain to pay respects. Perhaps because the sky suddenly turned cloudy in the afternoon, there weren't many people going up the mountain to worship. After a 30-minute journey, they reached the temple at the mountain peak. The wind had already started to pick up. Next to the South Heaven Gate on Wuling Mountain, there stood a tall locust tree. It was covered with red ribbons for praying for blessings. A young monk bowed with his hands clasped. It's said that couples who make wishes and pray for blessings here will receive protection. He looked at the two, feeling they were very well matched. Perhaps it was the highly compatible pheromones lingering around them. Today, Fu Jian was in a very good mood. Seeing Zhang was interested and taking the initiative to speak. "I'll go request one." Zhang Zhang pursed her lips and nodded, agreeing to wait here for him. It looks like it might rain today. You should go to the BU pavilion first. I'll go there to find you directly in a little while. Zhang Zhang hesitated. I'll go with you. Actually, getting caught in the rain together could be quite interesting. Thinking back on it many years later, it might seem a little romantic. He rarely said things like this. For a moment, Fujian was somewhat dazed, staring blankly at the small dimple beside his lips. The two of them went to the main hall together and obtained prayer bags. They wrote their own names and hung them on the pagoda tree. Just after hanging them, a dull thunderclap sounded in the sky. The raindrops were very heavy, striking the body with some stinging pain. Fujian shielded the person and they walked 2 steps to the covered corridor. Seeing Zhang Zhang drenched by the rain, looking pitiful, he then suggested going to borrow clothes for him. Seeing this, Zhang Zhang lifted her face to look at him, extremely worried. I'm not cold. The rain is at its heaviest now. You should still take shelter from the rain with me. Fujian smoothed her hair for her, his voice very deep and soft. You go to the BU pavilion to take shelter from the rain first. I'll be there in a few minutes. Zhang Zhang frowned. I want to go with you. Fujian, unusually, was a bit more forceful. You wait for me here. He even released a bit of his pheromones, compelling Zhang Zhang to comply with the arrangement. Zhang Zhang pursed her lips and nodded helplessly, watching as Fujian left. The worried expression on his face gradually faded. Bai Li and the others were also at Wheeling Mountain today. How could Fujian miss such a perfect moment for their relationship to heat up? But it just so happened to give him an opportunity. He sat steadily on the stone chair of the BU pavilion. After a while, he heard somewhat familiar footsteps. Turning around, he curved his eyes and looked at the newcomer. You're here. But when he saw who it was, he suddenly froze for a moment. After a long while, his ears turned bright red and he stammered, "Ah, it's you." Gu Ying looked at him. Zhang Zhang was completely drenched. The delicate curves of his slender shoulders and back were accentuated. The subtle fragrance became more pronounced. His crimson lips parted slightly, peach blossom eyes glistening with moisture. Gu Ying's Adam's apple bobbed as he took a step closer to him. His gaze fell on the collar that was about to slip off his shoulder, and as if bewitched, he reached out. Zhang Zhang instinctively avoided his hand. The air fell into an awkward silence. Zhang Zhang clenched his fist, hesitating for a moment. Finally, he looked up, smiled at him, and stood up. What a coincidence, Mr. Gu. Gu Ying paused for half a second, withdrew his hand, looked at him, and let out a faint hum. The BU pavilion is known for its exquisite design. The stone table and chairs only come in a matching set of 1 table and 3 chairs. Zhang Zhang had originally been sitting on the stone chair with his back to the entrance. But after Gu Ying entered, his nearly 1.9-meter height exuded an overwhelming sense of pressure. He instinctively stood up and took 2 steps back. Are you also here at Wheeling Mountain to pray to the Buddha? Gu Ying nodded and directly sat in the spot where he had been sitting. See this. Zhang Zhang finally let out a sigh of relief, sitting in the seat farthest from him, as if avoiding him. Gu Ying frowned almost imperceptibly, lowered his gaze to the tea on the stone table. In the cool air, a trace of warmth could still be seen. Across from him, Zhang wore only thin clothes, drenched by the rain. From his position, he could see Zhang Jiang's perky nose tip and slightly pursed red lips, and damp eyelashes, like a little cat drenched in the rain. Gu Ying had always been praised in the business world as a negotiation expert. Even at a disadvantage, he could calmly identify the opponent's weaknesses and break them down one by one. But for some reason, the atmosphere at this moment made him feel inexplicably irritable. Then he casually tapped the stone table and asked, puzzled, "Aren't you teaching class?" Zhang Zhang looked up at him, somewhat bewildered. Then, as if remembering something, she caught on. Yesterday was just temporarily substituting for teacher Yang. Actually, I don't usually teach there. She bit her lower lip lightly, as if gathering courage. looked up and met Gu Ying's gaze, explaining the reason for coming here today. Then, with slightly curved eyes, she seemed a bit flustered. It's all a coincidence, I'm not deliberately pestering you. I don't mean to seduce you either. Gu Ying slowly furrowed his brows. His features were sharp, and when expressionless, they carried a fierce intensity, making those who met his gaze feel afraid. Zhang Jiang's breathing quickened. She pressed her lips together and stood up. Sorry to have disturbed you. After saying that, he was about to walk out of the pavilion. But before he could leave, his wrist was grabbed. He froze for a moment, then turned his head in confusion. Gu Ying, with the dark expression, said word by word, "How did you disturb me?" Being coldly questioned, Zhang instinctively lowered his gaze and turned his head away. Gu Ying's voice turned even colder as he spoke, probably because he was used to giving orders to subordinates. When he coldly uttered these two words, Zhang instinctively obeyed, unable to shake off Gu Ying's hand, and being forced under pressure to look up. After a while, he bit his lower lip, lifted his eyelids and slowly raised his gaze, but suddenly met Gu Ying's eyes. "Why did you say, disturb?" Zhang lowered his eyes, his eyelashes trembling slightly. He did not speak. Gu Ying's voice was faint as he spoke, repeating for the third time, yet without much impatience, like catching a small, weak, and soft prey, playing with it patiently. The prey, targeted by a fierce beast, had its fighting spirit gradually worn away. Zhang was like a little cat with its ears drooping. "You were here sheltering from the rain. I saw that you seemed to be in a bad mood earlier. It must be that I disturbed your peace, right? I know your status is not ordinary. You don't like being disturbed by strangers. So I." After he finished speaking, Gu Ying did not speak, and the scene fell silent again. Then, looking down at him from above, noticed how truly frail and porcelain white he was. Even his thin eyelids were slightly flushed red. Gu Ying spoke this time. "I don't mean to mind you bothering me, nor do I think you have any other intentions. I'm not asking you to avoid me." Hearing this, Zhang Jiang's eyes were slightly red, but last time, Gu Ying pressed his lips together and sounded a bit stifled when he spoke. "Sorry." Apologizing for his previous blunt remarks. He comes from a noble family, with an exceptional background and outstanding career. This was practically the first time he had lowered his head to apologize to someone. After a moment, he heard a very soft reply. "It's okay, you don't need to worry about it." Zhang smiled at him, his peach blossom eyes hiding tenderness. "It was my actions at the time that caused you to misunderstand. I was also at fault." After speaking, a cold wind blew by. He was choked by the cold wind and coughed once. "Sorry, I might be a bit chilled." Gu Ying frowned, took off his suit jacket and draped it over his shoulders. The alpha's scent of alcohol mixed with the bloody smell. His pheromones enveloped them. Zhang felt somewhat awkward, but he couldn't resist the alpha's inherent dominance and aggressiveness. His fingertips clutched the somewhat oversized front of the jacket. "Mr. Gu, I'm troubling you again." The rain gradually lessened. The small space between the two of them held a strange ambiguity. Gu Ying suddenly said, "How are you getting back?" "I'm driving back with my husband." After a long while, he let out an Suddenly, Gu Ying's hand gripped his wrist. Zhang Jiang's cheeks felt somewhat warm. In a few moments, the heavy rain stopped. Then a familiar male voice called out. He froze for a moment, then looked up toward the distant corridor. It was Fu Jian. Subconsciously shaking off Gu Ying's hand, his lower lip flustered. Lowering his head, he whispered softly, "I need to go back first. My husband has come looking for me." "Thank you for today, Mr. Gu." Making a move to take off the coat, Gu Ying stopped his motion. "You keep it on." It carried a tone that brooked no refusal. "Well, thank you then, goodbye." Waving at him, Zhang quickly left Bai Yu Pavilion, heading toward a young man in the distance whose features were unclear. Gu Ying watched for a while, then lowered his gaze, lost in thought. Goodbye, Mr. Gu. Hearing the voice, he instinctively looked up. That youth's brows and eyes were curved, his voice clear and crisp. Goodbye, though his appearance was distinctly aloof. When speaking, his earnest gaze and peach blossom eyes were even more captivating. He paused for a moment, then after a while nodded, goodbye. When Zhang met up with Fu Jian in the distance, he brushed past someone who looked somewhat familiar. That person seemed somewhat flustered, their phone dropping to the ground. Bending down to help pick up the phone for that person. He didn't expect to look up and realize it was actually Bai Li. Bai Li was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and long pants, his face very red. The moment their eyes met, he flusteredly looked away as if afraid. Zhang felt suspicious, lowering his gaze to sweep over Bai Li's lips and the corners of his eyes. It looked like he had just been kissing. So, the direction this person came from was to go kiss her husband. How interesting. Lowering his gaze to hide a smile. Bai Li seducing someone else's husband. Have you ever thought that you would also be cheated on? When Bai Li was intimate with Fu Jian, her fiancé was also doing it with me. The corners of his lips curled into an extremely gentle smile. Mr. Bai, what a coincidence. When Bai Li is naive and guilty, her face is full of sudden realization. She stammered and hummed in agreement, taking the phone from his hand, said thank you. When he stood next to Bai Li, he was half a head taller than her. Looking down, he said, by the way, Mr. Bai, have you seen my husband? Noticing Bai Li's trembling fingertips, he couldn't help but let out a light laugh. After all, you and my husband have a very good relationship. Hearing this, Bai Li suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. I haven't seen him just now. Is that so? It was raining earlier, Mr. Bai. You got wet too. Wearing wet clothes for too long can easily make you sick. His fingertips tightened on the collar of his suit. My husband and I are about to go back. Do you want to come with us? Bai Li's face instantly turned a shade paler. She waved her hand. No need. At this moment, Fu Jian strode over to the two of them. His gaze swept over Bai Li, who was at a disadvantage, finally settling on Zhang. What's wrong? Zhang turned her head to look at him. I ran into your colleague and said a few words. I also asked if we should bring your colleague along. It would be more convenient to go back together. She tilted her head and smiled. Fu Jian pursed his lips and remained silent, staring at him motionlessly. Strictly speaking, the two of them are in a marriage before love relationship and are not very close. This was the first time he had seen Zhang in this state. Her hair and eyelashes were damp, yet she was as strikingly beautiful as a lotus emerging from water. Only then did he notice the clothes Zhang was wearing and frown. His tone unconsciously cooled by 2 degrees. Whose clothes are these? Alphas are all possessive and have extremely strong territorial instincts. Even the faint scent on that suit was an eyesore. The alpha's scent was too obvious, making people instinctively hostile towards potential rivals who might snatch their omega. I ran into a friend while taking shelter from the rain just now. He saw my clothes were all wet, so he lent me his clothes. The words "were all wet" made Fu Jian's frown deepen even more. Doesn't that mean he saw things he shouldn't have seen? And what's more, it's a friend. Zhang has always been reserved in high school and college, because her looks were too outstanding. Her cool and distant aura drove away a large number of pursuers, resulting in her not having many friends, let alone alpha friends. He felt inexplicably uncomfortable. Who is it? Do I know them? When you return the clothes, tell me. I'll go with you to thank them. Zhang blinked and said, okay. Fu Jian's gaze was almost fixed on her rosy lips. He involuntarily wrapped his arm around her shoulder. The wind is too cold. Let's take the cable car down first. As soon as Zhang mentioned Mr. Bai, Fu Jian seemed to remember only then that Bai Li was still here. He immediately furrowed his brows in annoyance. Before he could even speak, He saw Bai Li's face turn both red and pale. It seemed tears glistened in his eyes as he turned and walked away, saying, "No need." Zhang looked worriedly at his retreating back. "Husband, is Bai Li feeling unwell? His complexion doesn't look too good." Fu Jian, of course, knew exactly why Bai Li was throwing a tantrum. But for now, Zhang was still his lover. He certainly couldn't abandon his own lover to go after him. "Not sure, let's go first." Zhang nestled into his chest, lowering her eyes to conceal a smile. Bai Li stormed off furiously towards Bai Yu Pavilion. He was already in a bad mood today. After calling Fu Jian and discovering he was also here, he secretly met up with Fu Jian and even shared a kiss. But his happiness lasted only a few minutes before he ran into that green tea bitch. He clearly knew, yet still said those things. And Fu Jian, after walking over, seemed completely bewitched by her. What a bitch! As he arrived at Bai Yu Pavilion, he saw Gu Ying wearing only a shirt. His overwhelming rage and grievance suddenly stalled for a moment. Wasn't Gu Ying supposed to be selling clothes in a suit? For some reason, he thought of Zhang, who was wearing a suit jacket. That jacket seemed very similar to the one Gu Ying had on when he arrived. An unbelievable possibility crossed his mind. He asked in a trembling voice, "Gu Ying, where are your clothes?" Gu Ying lifted his eyelids and glanced at him. Bai Li let out a breath and said nonchalantly, "I'm a bit cold. Can I borrow your jacket? I'll return it to you." Gu Ying got up and walked away, no longer there. Bai Li's heart sank sharply. His face instantly turned pale. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Did he accidentally lose it somewhere? Gu Ying only grunted in response. Bai Li breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't given to Zhang, it was fine. Probably because he had a guilty conscience. He always feared Zhang would retaliate against him. For example, by seducing his fiancée. Although he liked Fu Jian very much and wanted to get close to him, he didn't want to separate from Gu Ying. He wanted to marry Gu Ying. The Gu family was originally a top-tier, influential family, and the new head, Gu Ying, after taking over the Gu group, elevated it to an even higher level. Even if he didn't bother with worldly affairs, he still knew what status the Gu family held in City A. His own family was originally a second-rate family. They barely managed to secure a marriage alliance by leveraging their childhood friend connection, which only slightly stabilized the Bai family's position. Many people also only showed some respect to the Bai family, out of consideration for Gu Ying's face. Every time he returned home, his family also urged him to quickly solidify the relationship with Gu Ying, thinking about how his mother taught him to seduce Gu Ying, even to the point of getting pregnant with his child. His cheeks burned fiercely. The two entered the main hall. An elderly woman dressed in a proper kipao, her hair coiled up, waved a red paper in her hand, gesturing for the two to come over. Ying, you two come and take a look." She beckoned the two to her front and handed them the red paper. The abbot selected several very auspicious dates. "See what you think. The nearest one is next month." Bai Li favored next month in his heart. But as the Omega Party, it's always not good to be eager. It makes oneself seem cheap. So he looked up at Gu Ying. "Gu Ying, when do you want to?" Gu Ying was silent for a moment and just said, "Whatever." This indifferent attitude made Bai Li grit his teeth, his eyes stinging. "I think next month is just fine." Gu Ying didn't respond and sat to the side, opened his phone and started replying to emails. Zhang was in a very good mood all the way home. The system promptly popped up, happily announcing the good news. "Host, the favorability value of the beauty Gu Ying has reached 70. I feel like he already has a crush on you." Huh. Zhang raised an eyebrow. This person really has the makings of a domineering CEO stoic face. Thoughts hard to decipher. Fu Jian parked the car, noticed the curve at his lips, and that he was in a very good mood. "Zhang, are you happy today?" Zhang pressed his lips together and made him sound. "It's been so long since we went out together. Today was super fun." He pressed his lips together and smiled at Fu Jian. Fu Jian's heart softened a bit. He got out of the car, quickly walked a few steps to open the passenger door, and reached out his hand. "Come on, let's go home." Zhang made a sound and placed his hand in his palm. Fu Jian held his hand and asked if he was cold. Zhang got out of the car. "It's okay." He was originally tall and slender. Wrapped in a large suit jacket, he looked even more handsome. Fu Jian let out a light sigh. "It's my fault for not checking the weather forecast in advance." Zhang curved his eyes and hooked his fingertip against Fu Jian's palm. "I checked the weather forecast, but didn't expect it to suddenly rain. Don't blame yourself," he whispered softly. "Fu Jian Gij is super good." Hearing this, Fu Jian's breath hitched slightly, his heart uncontrollably speeding up. The two held hands and slowly walked toward the elevator. Just as the elevator doors closed, Zhang looked up and saw a car that had just stopped. A gleaming Maybach with the familiar license plate. It was Gu Ying. He instinctively looked toward the back seat. The car window was half open, revealing Bai Li sitting in the back seat, and Gu Ying, who was closer to his side. Gu Ying suddenly turned his head and looked toward the elevator. Their eyes met directly. Zhang instinctively smiled. Gu Ying remained cold and expressionless. When they got home, Fu Jian unusually went to cook. Zhang went to take a shower first. After showering, he looked at himself in the mirror. His appearance hadn't changed. He still looked the same as before. But perhaps because his heat period this month wasn't over yet, the corners of his eyes were still slightly flushed, and his lips were very red. Fu Jian made 3 dishes and a soup. Quite a spread. Zhang, wearing a bathrobe, sat at the table. He opened the chat dialogue with Gu Ying. "Little Zhang doesn't eat ginger. Mr. Gu, are you back?" He put down his phone and ate a couple bites of food. He never expected Gu Ying to actually reply to the message. He refused the reply. It seems the person he saw earlier really was Gu Ying. "Little Zhang doesn't eat ginger. When would be a convenient time for me to bring the clothes over to you? Have you eaten dinner tonight?" Gu Ying refused. "No need." Zhang raised an eyebrow. "Of course, that won't do. Returning the clothes is an opportunity for contact. He still needs to increase his favorability points, of course. He can't give up. Then I'll leave them at the property management office for you to pick up. Is that okay?" "Sure enough." After a while, the other side replied. "G free tomorrow night? Then we can still arrange a dinner." Plan successful. Seeing Zhang Jiang's curved eyes and smiling expression as he replied to messages, Fu Jian felt somewhat displeased. He added a piece of bamboo shoot to Zhang Jiang's bowl. "A colleague?" Zhang was startled for a moment. Then he looked up at him. A faint smile still lingered at the corner of his lips. He pressed his lips together, hesitating slightly. "No, it's a friend." If he had been open and honest, Fu Jian might not have thought much of it. But him being so secretive and evasive absolutely meant there was a problem. "The one who lent you the clothes?" Fu Jian had a sudden inspiration. Zhang put down his phone. "It's him." Fu Jian stiffened slightly, gripping his chopsticks tighter. "Is that so?" he retorted, whether he was provoked or not. His complexion hadn't been good the entire time. When they reached the restroom, according to the usual arrangement, the two of them had separate rooms, one the master bedroom and one the secondary bedroom. But Fu Jian took a pillow and knocked on Zhang Jiang's door. Zhang was reading a book. "Come in." Never expected to look up and see Fu Jian holding a pillow. Was dazed for a moment, then suddenly realized. Face instantly burned red, pressed lips together, and spoke somewhat haltingly. "Did you want to stay together?" His hand tightened around the book. Even his fingertips flushed with blood. Probably because his reaction was too nervous. Fu Jian was infected by this atmosphere and coughed lightly twice. "Is that a—" Zhang put down the book, moved the pillow and leaned to the side. "Will my reading disturb you?" Fu Jian shook his head, put down the pillow, and took out another quilt from the cabinet. "No, what do you like to read?" A few days ago, during your estrus period, I was working overtime and didn't have time to accompany you. You can't always take suppressants either. Don't take this last injection. I'll stay with you all night tonight. With pheromone soothing, you should be able to get through it. Fu Jian wasn't this kind in the past. Could it be that he was triggered by the presence of other Alphastidae? Couldn't wait to start declaring sovereignty. T-esque. Alphas are really easy to handle. He put down the book in his hand and turned off the desk lamp. Sleep early, you still have to work tomorrow. After a while, he fell into a deep sleep. Fu Jian opened his eyes and looked at him. Actually, from the beginning, he also had the intention to get along well with Zhang. Marriage. He and Zhang lived in the same compound since childhood. Their parents were employees of the same unit. He also likes this little brother very much. But he didn't expect to meet Bai Li when entering the company. He doesn't know why he suddenly developed feelings for Bai Li. The tranquility of this moment and the entanglement of highly compatible pheromones made him fantasize for a moment. Suddenly, the phone placed beside his hand vibrated. Fu Jian picked up the phone and found it was Zhang Jiang's. He originally had no intention of snooping, but the message notification was displayed on the lock screen. G tomorrow at PM, you bring the clothes. The rest of the message couldn't be seen. Fu Jian immediately narrowed his eyes and felt uncomfortable inside. Even though he couldn't say he had deep feelings for Zhang, as long as they weren't divorced, Zhang was his omega. The next day, when Zhang woke up, he felt a burning sensation on the back of his neck. He opened his eyes and heard Fu Jian pushing the door open. His whole body felt weak, and he looked at him with some dependence. What time is it now? Fu Jian was dressed in a suit, looking ready to go to work. Zhang was probably affected by the pheromones. He was somewhat reluctant to let Fu Jian leave. In the end, before Fu Jian left, he left him a worn shirt. It carried the strong scent of an alpha's pheromones. Zhang was indeed somewhat affected. He hugged the shirt and curled up under the covers, opened his phone and replied to Gu Yin's message. He felt somewhat drowsy. In the end, he went back to sleep for a while longer. He had no classes today, so there was no need to rush to get up. Host Beauty, your original heat period was almost over. But last night, Fu Jian didn't know what he was thinking. He actually intentionally released a lot of pheromones. He deliberately released pheromones, making you enter heat again. Zhang probably felt speechless after seeing his message. An alpha's inexplicable possessiveness. At work, even though he himself cheated, he still gets jealous and wants them to faithfully wait for him. But overall, it's not exactly a bad thing. You can take advantage of the situation. When evening came, he still hadn't left as agreed by PM. He just opened the message. Little Zhang doesn't eat ginger. Sorry, Mr. Gu, I'm not feeling well. I might not be able to deliver your clothes today. This time, Gu Ying replied quickly. Sick? Little Zhang doesn't eat ginger. Yes, sorry, it's really not convenient. There's no one at home to help me deliver them either. After about 10 minutes, a message came from the other side. G, open the door. Zhang lowered his gaze and pushed aside the blanket. He touched his forehead. It was a bit hot. Probably a physiological fever from the heat period. Originally, he had been sleeping in pajamas. But after a thought, he just wore the pajamas. Only put on that Fu Jian's shirt, went barefoot to open the door. Gu Ying didn't know why he was standing in front of Zhang Jiang's door. When he saw Zhang was sick, and the message that there was no one at home, he had already stood up and left the house. He was silent at the door for a while before sending a message to Zhang. Gu Ying looked at the person who opened the door, his narrow eyes instantly darkening. He saw that the originally slender and delicate person was only wearing a shirt. Probably because he was sick, the corners of his eyes and the tip of his nose were tinged pink. Those peach blossom eyes were moist, and looked somewhat dazed. He was standing barefoot on the floor. Perhaps due to his illness, there was a hint of a nasal tone. His voice was sticky, as if coquettish. He curved his eyes. "Mr. Gu, what brings you here?" Gu Ying, down from his height, could even see through the wide collar. The delicate collarbone and skin. Originally tall and slender, the oversized shirt made him resemble an exquisite figurine doll, making one involuntarily soft-hearted and wanting to pull him into an embrace. He lowered his gaze, looked away, and his voice was somewhat hoarse when he spoke. Zhang blinked, his reaction a bit slow. "I'm feeling a little unwell." Gu Ying had actually noticed something was off about him at first glance. Zhang Jiang's fingers clung to the door, and he was dazed for a few minutes, before suddenly realizing and swiftly pulling the door open. "Please, come in and have some water, don't just stand there." "Oh, and your clothes, I have them ready for you too." Probably because he was sick, Zhang Jiang's speech carried a childish tone. His clear, moist voice was somewhat muffled, carrying a nasal quality as if he had been crying. A married Omega, home alone, and still sick. According to Gu Ying's own principles, he definitely should not enter. But for some reason, he did not refuse immediately. Instead, following Zhang Jiang's intention, he entered the door. Zhang Jiang half squatted in front of the shoe cabinet. "Would my husband's slippers be okay? The disposable slippers were used up the day before yesterday and haven't been restocked yet." Gu Ying's expression was faint, making it impossible to tell whether he was happy or not. Zhang Jiang pursed her lips and said cautiously, "Otherwise, you can just come in wearing your shoes. There's a floor mopping robot that can be turned on later." Gu Ying grunted and slipped on the shoes. Zhang Jiang blinked, took out the slippers, and handed them to him, subconsciously wanting to help Gu Ying put on the shoes. But before she could react, she was abruptly pulled up by a force. Gu Ying's expression was somewhat unpleasant. "No need to help. I can do it myself." Zhang Jiang nodded belatedly. "Please wait in the living room for a moment. I'll go pour you some water. Do you prefer milk or cola?" Gu Ying sat on the sofa and silently chose water. Zhang Jiang smiled, then "Please wait a moment." He walked to the kitchen to pour water. Gu Ying sat on the sofa and looked around at the core. The layout of this house was the same as theirs, 3 bedrooms and 1 living room. But compared to the model home he lived in, this room clearly showed that the owner understood how to live well. The sofa was a warm, fluffy white with different back cushions, probably specially chosen by the owner. Tulips and bird of paradise flowers were growing on the balcony, fresh and harmonious. There were even a few books on the table. The top book was opened a few pages in. Inside was a bookmark made of ginkgo leaves that she had made herself. Next to it, there was also a promotional flyer, probably handed to her by a street promoter when she went out. She had held it all the way back. It was an advertisement for the opening of a supermarket near the neighborhood, very much filled with the vibrancy of daily life. He glanced at the clean ashtray beside the book. It was clear that it belonged to the man of the house. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Zhang Jiang, who was approaching with a cup of water. "Here's some water for you." The white ceramic cup was very simple, but the handle was an orange cat's tail, somewhat similar to Zhang Jiang's avatar. Perhaps the water was a bit hot. Zhang Jiang was holding it carefully with both hands, bending slightly at the waist to hand it to Gu Ying. "Please be careful." His hands were slender and fair. They brushed against Gu Ying's distinctly boned hands. The touch, warm yet slightly cool, made both of them freeze for a moment. A few seconds later, Zhang abruptly withdrew his hand and lowered his gaze. "The water might be a little too hot. Please let it cool before drinking." Gu Ying took the cup and placed it on the table. Silence lingered between them for a few minutes. Zhang seemed to have finally remembered something. "Oh right, I almost forgot about your clothes. I've already had them cleaned and sent over from the dry cleaner." He walked toward a box across from the sofa. On the floor, he searched through it carefully. The shirt originally reached down to his upper thighs, but perhaps because of Zhang Jiang's movements, the fabric had ridden up a little, revealed pale legs. Gu Ying accidentally glanced and immediately averted his gaze. He lowered his eyes, picked up the cup, and took a sip. The veins on the back of his hand bulged, and he didn't say anything more. Zhang carried the packaged clothes over and placed them on the sofa. Thank you so much for yesterday. Gu Ying's Adam's apple moved. Where are you feeling unwell? Zhang frowned. A slight fever. And probably because the heat period hasn't passed yet. Gu Ying lowered his head and sent a message to Lu Jin. If an Omega has received comfort from an Alpha during their heat period, why are the reactions still so strong in the following days? Lu Jin quickly replied. There are only two possibilities. The first is that the Alpha's pheromones are too weak and simply can't suppress the Omega's heat period. There's another possibility, which is that this Omega has been influenced by another Alpha's pheromones, causing a sensitive reaction. Gu Ying looked at Zhang. He seemed listless, his eyelids faintly red, wrapped in a shirt carrying the scent of an Alpha's pheromones, probably because he was at home. He rarely left his long hair untied, just casually tucked behind his ears, looking cold and melancholic. It was the clothes he lent Zhang yesterday, the scent of pheromones on them, made his Alpha husband unhappy. So did he intentionally use his pheromones to influence? He followed the sound and looked at Zhang. Zhang covered his calf, his peach blossom eyes glistening with tears. He looked somewhat pitifully at his own ankle. He had bumped into the table when he stood up just now. It's okay. I'll just get some medicine to apply, and it'll be fine. Even though he was already sick and now injured, Zhang still didn't want to trouble others, gently and softly reassuring others. Gu Ying frowned as he came over. Where is the first aid kit? Zhang pointed to a location inside the cabinet by the entrance. Gu Ying gave an in acknowledgement. He took the first aid kit and strode back to the sofa, took out iodine, alcohol, and cotton swabs. Zhang Jiang's face was a little red, and he seemed somewhat embarrassed. But hearing Gu Ying's commanding voice, he subconsciously offered the calf he was holding forward. Gu Ying grasped Zhang Jiang's ankle. It was slender, warm, and exquisitely delicate. To make applying the medicine more convenient, he placed Zhang Jiang's ankle on his own leg. Zhang touched the smooth, cold silk of the trousers, subconsciously curling his toes. Don't move. Gu Ying lowered his gaze, carefully applying the medicine. After he finished applying it, he lifted his eyelids to look at Zhang, but paused for a moment. Zhang seemed uncomfortable from having his ankle held, his whole body leaning back against the pillow, one leg raised. The black shirt was pushed up, legs parted. He pressed his lips together, the tips of his ears and his nose both flushed red, his peach blossom eyes shimmering like spring water, gazing tenderly at Gu Ying. Gu Ying suddenly looked up at him. Zhang was probably in some pain. His peach blossom eyes were glistening, the thin eyelids flushed red. Even when bullied, he whispered softly, "Could you be gentler?" Gu Ying, as if possessed, began to wonder. When Zhang is marked by an alpha, does he also look like this when bitten and hurt? Just pitifully begging the alpha to bite a little softer. Does this person even know that this kind of pitiable appearance only further stirs an alpha's excitement, making one want to bully him fiercely? The beauty's pheromones leaked. The two began to kiss passionately. Zhang suddenly retracted his leg, moving quickly, pulling his shirt over his bent knees. Thank you, I feel much better. Gu Ying rarely saw Zhang in such a childish manner. His Adam's apple bobbed as he said, I'm leaving. At a time like this, staying in a married Omega's home was highly inappropriate. Zhang raised his damp peach blossom eyes, looking at him somewhat bewildered. After a moment, he belatedly uttered an Then I'll see you out. He stood up, stumbling slightly due to the injury on his ankle, seemingly completely unaware that anything was amiss with himself. I just happened to need to go to the supermarket downstairs to buy some groceries anyway. Gu Ying frowned, but didn't say anything more. The two walked to the entrance. Gu Ying looked at him, wearing only a shirt, pinched the bridge of his nose. You're going out like this? Zhang was stunned, blinking as he looked at him. Gu Ying sighed, directly grabbed his wrist, pushed open the door according to the direction of his own house's bedroom. Without looking further, sent the person to the side of the wardrobe. You change your clothes. Zhang frowned, dazed and confused, and went to change clothes. Gu Ying seemed to have no temper, hummed in acknowledgement, and repeated it again. Zhang obediently nodded. Gu Ying tilted his head and saw the somewhat messy master bedroom. Remnants of an unfamiliar alpha's scent. 2 pillows. Didn't look further, intending to leave the room and give him space. His peripheral vision caught a glimpse of an extremely white color. He suddenly paused. Zhang took out a set of clothes, directly began to slowly unbutton the collar of his shirt. His fingertips were very nimble even in a dazed state. Even Gu Ying seemed to vaguely catch a glimpse of a deep red color. He suddenly closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and strode out of the master bedroom. He waited at the entrance for a few minutes. Zhang pulled open the master bedroom door and stumbled out. Gu Ying thought he was uncomfortable somewhere, frowned and scanned him up and down a few times. Zhang blinked, tugged at the corner of his clothes, pursed his lips, and smiled. He probably came out in a bit of a rush. The stray hairs by his ears were somewhat messy, making him appear even more childish. Are you going back to work? Thank you so much for helping me apply the medicine. Gu Ying said lightly, it's nothing. The two got on the elevator. Zhang pressed the first floor, somewhat bewildered. Are you going to work at the company? Gu Ying looked at the message from Lu Jin on his phone and frowned. The second trigger can be particularly unstable. I heard that just a few days ago, there was an Omega who went into heat for the second time. Caused many alphas present at the mall to go crazy. In the end, the whole scene was quite messy. That Omega stayed in the hospital for a long time. Gu Ying put down his phone and headed to the company. First, go to the supermarket to buy some things. Zhang exclaimed softly. What a coincidence, Mr. Gu. We can go to the supermarket together then. The two made their way to the supermarket downstairs. Zhang pushed the shopping cart, glancing at Gu Ying beside him, dressed in a suit and exuding an air of noble elegance. Do you want to buy something? Gu Ying frowned, wondering if he seemed strange. Why was Zhang smiling at him a bit oddly? Let's take a look first. Zhang first went to the fruits and vegetables section to look around, slowly picking out oranges. Their fragrance was refreshing and delightful. He picked up an orange and instinctively handed it to Gu Ying. Mr. Gu, do you like oranges? The oranges today are so fresh. We can buy some to try. Noticing the free samples nearby, he picked up a small toothpick and handed it to Gu Ying. Would you like to try it? Gu Ying was about to refuse, but for some reason, looking into those eyes, he still lowered his gaze and opened his mouth. It was the first time he had ever looked so intently at the Omega across from him. Despite having a cold, ethereal appearance, as if untouched by worldly matters, he was so gentle. Zhang handed it to Gu Ying. The other hand was still subconsciously cupping Gu Ying's chin. Will it be a bit sore? Sorry, if it's a bit sore, then spit it out. This variety is sweet and sour. You might not like it much. Zhang tends to bite her lip when she's at a loss. Her breathing was somewhat rapid, carrying the rose scent unique to an Omega. It misted and lingered around the two of them. Gu Ying lowered her eyes and stood up straight. After the tasting, the atmosphere between the two grew increasingly strange. As if some emotion was brewing. The two parted at the supermarket entrance. Zhang noticed Gu Ying hadn't bought anything, and still insisted on stuffing several oranges into her hands. When it reached evening, Zhang curled up shivering under the master bedroom's quilt. The burning sensation on the back of her neck was too intense. She struggled to get her phone and made a call. After a few seconds of ringing, the other side picked up. What's wrong? A faint male voice came through the phone. Zhang, with a tearful voice. Husband, I feel so unwell. I want you. Come back and mark me, okay? The man's deep voice came through the receiver. His cold tone added more fuel to the burning atmosphere. I feel so unwell. Zhang Jiang's gentle, cool voice became soft and charming. With a kind of pitiful feeling, Gu Ying frowned and called her name again. Then, rustling sounds could be heard, followed by somewhat muffled sobbing sounds. Gu Ying's frown grew deeper and tighter. Zhang Jiang's softly suppressed voice lingered in the ear. It seemed like he was enduring pain or softly sobbing. Clearly, he was so gentle and unwilling to trouble others. How miserable must it be for someone to be tormented like this? He knew Zhang Jiang had probably dialed the wrong number. He then recalled the scene when he had encountered Zhang Jiang before. His narrow phoenix eyes lowered, gazing at the contract on the table. "Where are you now?" Zhang Jiang suppressed a soft cry and spoke. "I'm at home." The muffled voice seemed to be buried under the blankets. Gu Ying directly tapped the table lightly. He lifted his eyelids, glanced at his watch, and said calmly, "Wait." He hung up the phone. The assistant beside him cautiously asked, "President Gu, there is a symposium in 10 minutes. Should we proceed as originally scheduled, or?" Then, the aloof and noble President Gu stood up. He picked up the car keys and walked out. "Postpone it for 2 hours." The assistant cautiously acknowledged, but was greatly shocked inside. Could it be that Omega we met last time? But hasn't that Mr. Zhang gotten married? Is the president trying to become the other man? 10 minutes later, Gu Ying arrived downstairs. On his way up, he called Zhang, but no one answered. Gu Ying lowered his gaze to his phone. Probably on the phone with her alpha husband. He quietly watched the ascending elevator. When the elevator reached the 25th floor, he paused for a moment before stepping out. Seeing Zhang Jiang's door, he frowned slightly. By now, her husband had probably learned of the situation and was rushing back. It might be a bit inconvenient to go over again. He turned and entered the elevator to go downstairs. But when he got off the elevator on the first floor, he ran into a familiar person. It was the department manager of their group. That person was relatively gentle and refined. After seeing him, he paused for a moment before saying, "President Gu, do you live here too?" Gu Ying nodded. As he passed by, the faint scent that drifted out felt very familiar. It was the same scent that lingered around. He silently rolled down the car window and gazed ahead indifferently. After about 10 minutes, the man who had just gone upstairs hurriedly came back down. Frowning, he quickly walked away. As he passed by the Maybach, that sweet, cloying scent felt extremely familiar. Gu Ying lowered his eyes, opened the car door, and unhurriedly walked into the elevator to go upstairs. The elevator stopped on the 25th floor. This building had one elevator per household. He stood in front of Zhang Jiang's door and gently knocked. But he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He paused for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in with familiarity. The scent was unusually strong, mixed with the scent of another alpha. He walked to the master bedroom and pushed open the slightly open door. He looked at the person trembling under the covers and said calmly, "Zhang Jiang." No one responded. Frowning, he strode forward, muttered an apology, and lifted the corner of the blanket. He looked at the person under the covers, crying so hard they could barely breathe. Zhang Jiang, with his naturally fair, cool-toned skin. At this moment, crying until both the corners of the eyes and the tip of the nose were red. Eyelashes glistening with wet tears. Looking over, bewildered and aggrieved, still sobbing. Gu Ying said softly in a low voice, "Are you okay?" Zhang Jiang seemed to be dazed for a moment. The rims of the eyes turned even redder. A teardrop slid from the corner of the eye down to the chin. With a soft pat, it fell onto the blanket. He didn't make a sound, even unusually avoiding eye contact, crying while biting the lower lip hard, unwilling to make a sound, looking utterly pitiful. Gu Ying frowned, pinched his chin, and lifted it. "Stop crying." He had never dealt with an Omega who cried like this before. Somewhat irritably, with a furrowed brow, he pressed, "You haven't finished speaking." Zhang Jiang, with his chin pinched, did not resist, docilely tilting his face upward, eyes lowered. thick curly eyelashes, wet and adorned with teardrops. Gu Ying took a deep breath, pressed his thumb against Zhang Jiang's lower lip. Let go. Zhang Jiang's lips were forced apart by him. Could only take small, shallow breaths. Like a pitiful little animal. Gu Ying looked at Zhang Jiang's other hand, tightly clutching a phone. On it was a call log with the name, Fu Jian, written. Then, recalling the man who had appeared earlier, and hurriedly left, he naturally realized who her husband was. Unusually, he felt a hidden anger. An alpha should take care of and comfort. An omega not properly cared for. Even he knew. If an omega doesn't properly get through, it can harm the glands, affecting the omega's normal life. Zhang cried even harder, yet still without a sound. With eyes closed, tears fell pattering. Tears dropped onto the back of his hand, his wrist, and the webbed space between his thumb and index finger. For the first time, Gu Ying felt dizzy-headed. He made a move that was unlike him. He reached out his other hand and placed it on Zhang Jiang's nape. Holding it gently, he bent down, wrapped his arms around Zhang Jiang, and pulled him into an embrace. He thought he must have gone mad. He pressed a kiss to the corner of Zhang Jiang's lips, like a fierce wild beast using its nose to nudge against a soft little opening, leaving behind its own scent. He whispered softly, "Don't cry." This kiss was filled entirely with tenderness and pity. Perhaps it was an alpha's slightly forceful comfort. Zhang Jiang's state slowly calmed a little. His sobs stopped, replaced by small, animal-like whimpers. Gu Ying simply gently pressed his lips against him, slowly releasing his scent, using an alpha's scent to soothe. Zhang Jiang's hand subconsciously clutched the hem of his clothes. The distance between the two grew closer and closer. Two scents entangled together, creating an extremely atmospheric haze. After a long while, the two finally pulled apart slightly. Gu Ying looked down at Zhang, who was still trembling. His originally thin eyelids were completely flushed. The corners of his eyes and the tip of his nose were red, clearly pitiful. From Gu Ying's angle, he could even faintly see the omega's lips, rubbed red. Zhang pressed his lips together, head bowed, the tips of his ears so red, they seemed about to drip blood. It seems he has regained some clarity of mind. Fingertips, curling, half kneeling in Gu Ying's embrace. After a long while, he spoke in a small voice, apologizing. Gu Ying looked down at him with lowered eyes from above. When he spoke again, his voice was low and hoarse, saying something. Zhang was extremely tense. For a moment, he didn't even process what he was saying. He looked up somewhat dazedly, due to the movement and the position. When he raised his eyes, he saw the glistening moisture at the corner of Gu Ying's lips, which had been kissed. His cheeks flushed red, his peach blossom eyes widening. "I'm sorry, are you okay?" Gu Ying watched as he lightly bit his lower lip. But then, he hissed in pain. He hardly dared to look at Gu Ying's reaction. He directly stepped barefoot on the carpet and took out a tube of ointment from the drawer. Gu Ying glanced at it and noticed it was an anti-inflammatory ointment for wounds. Zhang let out a soft sigh. Carefully holding the ointment, he half knelt before the man. "Let me apply a little medicine for you. It'll help you heal faster." He half knelt on the bed, having just unscrewed the cap of the ointment. When he suddenly paused, the cotton swab seemed to be all used up. He frowned, beginning to hesitate. "Mr. Gu, can you apply it yourself?" He needed to avoid suspicion. Gu Ying glanced at him and reached out his hand. Zhang placed the ointment in his hand. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the slight calluses on Gu Ying's fingertips, and instinctively thought, "No wonder it hurt so much when he pinched me earlier." The man frowned as he looked at the ointment in his hand. Zhang suddenly understood. It would be very inconvenient to have a mirror at home. He paused and said, "Wait for me a moment." He went to the bathroom again and washed his hands meticulously. After carefully drying them, he returned indoors. "Let me help you." Although he felt very embarrassed, since Mr. Gu was doing this to help him, then he should take good care of Mr. Gu's injury. Zhang was actually considered tall and slender among omegas, but compared to alphas, especially top-tier alphas like Gu Ying, he still fell short. He stood very close to the man, so close that he could hear the faint sound of his breathing. The same scent enveloped both of them. Zhang lowered his gaze, pressed his lips together, squeezed the white ointment onto his fingertip, and gently applied it to the corner of the man's mouth. After 10 minutes, he finally managed to rub it open. Gu Ying lowered his gaze, looking down at him condescendingly. Zhang Jiang's eyelashes were thick and long, his lips pressed together seriously. His eyelashes trembled slightly, a sweet scent enveloping the surroundings. A strange hue tinged his cold eyes, looking at this omega who completely belonged to him. Drenched in his own scent, he had an eerie urge to pull the person into his embrace and cling closely. His Adam's apple bobbed. He closed his eyes to suppress his ill-timed thoughts. Perhaps he had restrained himself too harshly. So when Zhang finished applying and intended to withdraw his finger and leave, Gu Ying gripped his finger. Zhang panicked, flustered and at a loss. "Are you uncomfortable? Do you need more applied?" Gu Ying lowered his gaze, quietly watching him. "Aren't you going to apply it?" Zhang Jiang's peach blossom eyes widened for an instant. How could we let Guiying apply it for him? His face flushed crimson, and he lowered his eyes, murmuring softly, "I'm not feeling too unwell." The atmosphere was quiet for a while, yet not awkward at all. Instead, a strange emotion is brewing. Zhang slowly opened his eyes and looked at him. His fingers were still held by Guiying, but their eyes inadvertently met. He pursed his lips. Could it be that Gu Ying had also been staring at him all along? The two of them involuntarily made eye contact. This time, no one looked away. Gu Ying's gaze faintly fixed on his lips. The long and narrow phoenix eyes do not know. Why is there a cold and noble taste? Zhang was having some trouble breathing. He could feel Gu Ying's gaze. Zhang, do you know? If a person keeps staring at another person, what do you want?